Hello, five
Well,
people. Welcome.
yes. Yes. Hello. 6 people.
When I did it with Rajiv, we had like a good discussion with
Yeah, that was awesome.
Oh yeah, you were there.
I was looking forward to it, so I joined it pretty shortly after you guys started, but then I ended up going out to my kitchen to make food as you started talking about yoga, which I came back and I was like,
Oh,
man, I missed like the most relevant part for me, but
we
you
we
guys
should talk
released it, so
about that because it's
yeah,
wellness culture is part of the feminization phenomenon now, isn't it?
it's true. It's true.
I also want to talk about epistemology and how female status competition is part of this phenomenon.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah,
we'll
this
give
is a great spreadsheet you have going here. I'm impressed. Mine is just a
apparently.
collection of thoughts.
Yeah, it's my themes, but I recognize that my themes are not everybody's themes. So,
Oh no, it works out.
yeah.
Do you upload these live videos on YouTube? I upload them on mine if everyone else agrees that it's okay. Although my YouTube is like, no, it's not watched ever, but it's Lurpa Strike over
I'm
there.
okay with it. Honestly,
Okay.
I haven't uploaded anything to YouTube, but that's because I just don't feel like dealing with it.
Yeah, it actually took me a long time to get it to work out. But yes, I do upload it to my own personal one. So if anyone
Okay.
wants to watch this after the fact, I'll
Great.
have it uploaded at Lurpa Strike at
I'll also send it out, and you can also feel free to send it out if you like.
well, yeah, I'm gonna send it out to my subscribers as well.
Notification
Yeah.
settings. Hello, friends. Okay. No. When So what's your Saturday routine?
Um, Usually coffee and catching up on Substack. Weekends seem to be good for Substack articles, so I spend a lot of my morning reading Substack while I drink coffee.
I actually have not been reading other people's stuff as much as I should because I've been very busy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go full throttle on my, regular job and this at the same time, which is like not smart.
Well, careful of burnout. But yeah,
Um,
it's good to
I
be busy.
I think I'm burned out, but
Uh,
that's okay. That's okay. Okay. I feel like playing some music while we're just sitting here. I don't know how it'll come through, but
oh, you should try. While we wait for, you know what I realized is that I've been calling him Rowan, but I don't feel like that's correct. I realized later that I'm like, it's like Rohan or Rohan, isn't it? My
It's not
husband is
Rohan like Lord of the Rings. It is, though he does not claim to be brown. He is.
Yeah, I wondered because my husband, I like he looked at it, he's like from Lord of the Rings, and I was like, actually, you might be right because I don't know, and I've just been calling him Rowan like it's with a W the whole time, so now I feel a little silly. But while we wait for
That's
him,
funny. That's kind of funny. I really enjoy Thievery Corporation. It's like my default music. I
sounds
don't
cool
know.
so far. I hope the audience does not mind if I occasionally vape throughout this live stream.
Oh, are you weed vaping?
No, no. If I weed vaped, I would be useless in this conversation. It would
That's
just
fair.
nicotine.
That's fair. I only weed vape, but that is not a thing I do during the day because it makes me
Yeah,
useless.
pretty
Though
much.
I do enjoy smoking and pacing a lot.
Yeah.
Let's see who'll be here. Oh my gosh, Isabella's here. Hello, friend.
see.
Who else do I recognize?
It's hard to see who comes in from the chat. So let's see.
Hi, Sabi. I recognize several names here. Hello, Jay Truly. Hello, Preston. An uncivilized engineer. All people who are very thoughtful.
Yes, I'm excited.
Okay, friends, we're gonna start soon, but we have some topics, but we'll probably meander in many directions.
Yes, and you can help us meander.
Yes, you can help us meander, because there's probably lots of stuff we haven't thought of. I've just been thinking about this a lot, obviously, for the last year. So, as have you, though our perspectives come out in different styles, which I have enjoyed. Yours come out in more personal, like essay type things. Correct me if I'm wrong. But like you can extrapolate from it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you've got much more of an academic bent, and I've got kind of the let me relate this to everything in my life sort of bent.
Oh, Lily, hello. Oh, hi. I came here to be an emotionally absent father.
Oh, wonderful. I love that.
Thanks, some guy. Hi, Ian. It's kind of crazy how many names I've started to recognize. Like, I mean, there's just been people who I've been interacting with for a long time. So
yeah, it's great. I love Substack for that. I feel like you guys are all my friends. Just than a black screen.
Yeah, weirdly enough, even though we're being watched, you know what I realized as a result of writing publicly is that I'm no longer afraid to lose my job.
Yeah,
that was a weird thing that happened, actually, because I've been chronically afraid of being unemployed for a while, for like my entire career thus far. But because I have a separate thing outside of work, you know, it's honestly made me better at work. I didn't expect that to happen.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, shall we softly get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, friends. I'm gonna pause the music. Okay. Hello, I'm Anuradha. Thanks for joining. I am so happy you all are here. And I'm talking to Lerpa, who she and I have never met face to face, so this is the first time.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Mr. Ghostwind will be joining us at some point. But we will be talking about good old feminization, which just I wanted to talk to Lerpa about this specifically because she has a lot of smart and nuanced opinions on it and expresses them differently than I do, which I also really appreciate. And then separately, she and I have both been talking about this for a very long time.
Yeah.
So it's been I don't know how you feel, Lerpa, but it's been kind of frustrating to see it blow up, but then also have the arguments be so idiotic about it.
Yeah.
Right? Because oh my gosh, my glasses are causing glare. The way it's been talked about is very culture war and really like, what do you call it? It just lacks nuance and it's optimized for clicks and outrage, frankly. And then the New York Times responds to it and causes more outrage. But it was David Dennison who pointed out that the fact that the New York Times is even willing to talk about it signals a shift. So I think, Lerpa, what do you think? Has Substack been at the forefront of this? I kind of think so, but I don't know.
I think it has been, but it hasn't gotten the recognition that it deserves for being on the forefront. That's for sure. Because all these conversations, I see them in the discourse all the time, you know, for weeks before they show up, you know, in one of these magazines. So, and yeah, what's unfortunate is that on Substack, people are much more nuanced. You know, they think these things through a bit more thoroughly, but that's not what, you know, magazines like The Cut it wasn't The Cut. Compact. Yeah, Compact. New York Times, they don't really want that. You know, they want it to be shorter, less thoughtful, more inclined to get the clicks. But
yeah, and I'm
doing the work for them.
I'm like really disappointed because I used to read Compact. I no longer do because I see now that it also falls prey to feminization of discourse. But Anyway, there's a story behind that. I need to stop thinking about it because it's been bugging me so much. So I'm not going to go there for the moment. What do you, one, can you share with people who may not be familiar with you what you write about? Like, I don't know, cut some, whatever backstory you feel comfortable sharing.
Sure. Since I've been on Substack, well, since I've been blogging for a long time, and usually it's been about just cultural commentary, but also my very first blog was a feminist blog.
Mm.
So that was back in I don't know, between 2008 and 2010, 2011-ish. And that was kind of the heyday of like the WordPress blogspot kind of, feminist blogosphere. So it was funny though, at that time, I started as like a troll. I trolled these places, these blogs. I didn't like them. I thought they were just like perpetual victims. And, I had all those ideas. So I would just go on there to argue. And I'm surprised nobody blocked me from the main website I used to go troll. But
Oh,
um,
which website was that?
it was Feminist. I don't know if you're familiar. Jill Filipovich, she's on Substack now, but she used to run that one with some other people.
Feministy?
Yeah.
Feminist?
It
Okay,
was like
okay.
feminist with an E at the end. I never knew how exactly they pronounced it, but feminist
So
is how
you
I always
rolled
said it.
that.
Yeah, I used to all the time. And
That's kind of
but then I guess this is wrapped up in that story about my ex who was transgender. And I started
Mhm.
thinking about gender very differently. And then they kind of convinced me over at this website. And so I started seeing things from their point of view a bit more, the feminist point of view. So this was like what, 2007 or so. And I would have been like 24. And yeah, so I spent a couple years kind of on that train. But what I always wanted to do was like, it was like a big moment for like the MRAs, like we used to call them back then. They had their own anti-feminist blogs and they would talk about men's rights and things like that. And I wanted to like bring us together. That was sort of my goal, to like see if we could, find the common ways patriarchy hurt us all, that sort of thing.
Oh,
And
patriarch.
yeah.
Oh, okay. I've been talking to just women out in the world in real life
Mhm.
about this, and it's really hard to get past the okay, women mistreat each other. Why do they mistreat each other? The answer is always internalized misogyny and patriarchy still exist. There is like, it's like a thought terminating cliche that it's really hard to get past. But I did just this past week have luck try to change how one woman was thinking about it by asking questions in the Socratic manner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's really hard to um as me, it's hard to absorb the illogic and then stay calm and then ask questions instead of trying to
Fight
express
back.
logically why they're wrong.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work with women because we value relational harmony quite a bit, which is why I appreciate women like you because you don't push it about that. Um, so what is feminization to you?
um, oh, this has been an interesting one to think about because ever since that Compact article came out and the conversation has gone the way that it has. So I largely agreed at first, just because it makes sense. As soon as, you have any one gender dominating over another, you're going to have a difference in dynamics. And it makes sense to me how the sort of feminized norms of communication and management styles are going to change a workplace. And especially combined with the information, I think before any of this even started, we were all talking about how, like, once the gender balance reaches a certain number of women, men start to leave. And I think
Yes.
Mr. Ghostwind had written about this as well, and a few other people. Uh, yeah, and so thinking about that combined with why all of these things are changing, it's kind of interesting because the very first thing that like the feminist set would say about the male flight would be that they don't feel like there's enough status in an
Yeah.
all-female group. It's all about misogyny. It's
Oh,
easy to assume that, but what I've started to come around to is the idea that um, men and women simply don't compete the same way against each other. And
Mm,
in fact, it's harder to compete against each other.
yes.
And men especially don't want to, even if women want to. And I've
Yeah.
noticed that as a woman who's always wanted to be really competitive with men, that, yeah, a lot of them just aren't interested. They just don't want to. They don't have a benefit from it. They
Because
don't.
they feel like they don't look strong by winning against a woman, which I get.
Right. Yeah.
So how does
And
one deal with this?
yeah, and that's a good question. I mean, to bring it back to one more anecdote, I remember in high school, I wanted to be a wrestler super bad, and we didn't have a female wrestling team, and I knew none of the guys in my weight class. Like, I could never beat any of them. So I became a
Mhm.
wrestling cheerleader,
Oh wow, that's
and
bad. Damn.
close enough. And what I noticed though, there was like, a random female on like, I don't know, every fifth team or whatever, and they would lose immediately. But a lot of times, if they won, it was because the male forfeited right away. He was like, no, I'm not wrestling a woman. Or,
Uh,
I mean, a teenage girl, like they wouldn't even play. They just kind of
yeah.
back out. And so I kind of see that same dynamic happening. Just like, well, I'm just going to forfeit this game and go find something that's more suited toward me.
So
So,
yeah,
Yana.
there's a there there are two tiers of competition. One, an arbitrary tier between women that's based on likability and social consensus, like adhering to social consensus and like having a certain personality, like performing comfort and things and harmony. That competition, like that is an attempt to keep all women at the same level. Um, wait one second. One second. I gotta tell Rohan how to get on here. Um, should have an invite there. Okay. Um, right. Okay. Two-tiered competition. Uh, so there's an attempt to keep all women the same because evolutionarily speaking, we have evolved to covertly compete. I think the styles of competition are the big thing. I don't even know if it's necessary. It is like a slight tipping point. Oh, hello, Rohan. You finally made it. Thank you
Yeah, yeah.
for coming.
I was checking my Gmail the entire time. I was like, whoops.
Oh, no, this is stupid. You have to be on the app at while having your phone. So irritating, but thank you for joining. Would you like to introduce yourself to our people?
Yeah, sure. I go under the name Rohan Ghostwind. I write under the uh publication Brackish Waters, Barren Soil. Can you guys hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I don't want to derail your
No,
conversation.
no.
Like
We
you
just got
guys, most of the stuff that I write about nowadays, I mean, I just reference you, Anuradha. Like you just kind of take a lot of the discussion topics, and I feel like you have an interesting perspective, and like
thank you.
kind of talk about, I mean, like we've talked about this endlessly in the chat, but like you talk about the class aspect, you bring your own personal background, you have it from the inside. And quite frankly, the note that you made recently is like really pertinent. I mean, it's a very simple point, but it's also true. But it's this idea that a lot of the people who are kind of weighing in on this subject are pundits who've never really been inside the workplace. Like they're talking about it from a purely abstract theoretical level. And you can tell, like, this is one of the biggest problems with punditry, right? Like they just kind of go in and they give their takes. They want to like put something out there, but it's just purely at this, theoretical level that has nothing to do with their actual experience. Um, yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
No, I do. Actually, I want to ask you both. Why do you think that's the case? Like, why do you think people just seem to listen to these academics who have zero real world experience? Sorry, Helen Andrews, no fucking experience in the corporate world. Jesse Single, same thing. He wrote a really, like, frankly, bad set of arguments, like highly illogical. You and I discussed this in the chat, and I actually think we should maybe dig into how some of these arguments are not they're not logical and they're not structural. They are focusing on one, the wrong phenomena, and two, they have the same category errors that they're accusing Helen Andrews of having. Like her argument was already bad, but then in response, these lefty heterodox people are also making bad arguments. So what do you guys think about the discourse? Like, what's your meta commentary? Lorpa, how about you? We start with you.
Uh, well, let me see. I've got a whole bunch open right now. I don't know if I finished the Jesse Single piece, but let me take a look here. What I've found with a lot of the critiques is that people will they'll take little pieces like, well, men are dishonest too, which, I mean, that's true, right?
Not-
But but it's like men are dishonest too, and that seems to be like the last. They think that's the mic drop moment, you know, and
Yes.
but they're not really engaging with the deeper arguments, like
One woman,
how it actually happens.
just that reminded me, one woman commented saying that men do stupid things together as though that is equivalent to women shutting down debate among each other. Like, that's just not the same. Well,
Right.
individual men may not be interested in truth seeking. My point is, men are not punished in the same way for debating things logically as women are by each other. And I think this has to do with status competition. Fucking arbitrary status, Rohan, as you
Mhm.
said. Arbitrary status competition. So they see logically oriented women as frankly doing better in the workplace. As soon as I got out of a male-dominated work environment, I started doing better. Men are not trying to compete with me. I'm not trying to compete with them. I'm just trying to be competent, and they respect that. And this is a script that is the total opposite of what feminism gave me, and I have succeeded with it. But I think women see, oh, this woman competent is succeeding in a male-dominated like environment, and then they see that as a status threat. But they could just do the same thing. They could orient themselves differently, right? I think like competition, the way men and women compete is the primary cause of this feminization thing, where the female mode of competition, which is covert, has become the de facto competitive mode of the workplace, regardless of what that workplace is. Obviously, this is worse in, you know, sort of female dominated areas, as like worse than it is in, say, I don't know, engineering, or in my field, like technical architecture, whatever. Rohan, what do you think about all of this? Please expound on your arbitrary stupid status, if you would.
Yeah. I mean, the point of that piece was to just point out that it was two things. The first is, as we as a society get materially wealthier, back in the day, it was very easy to see who had status and who didn't, right? It was kind of like if you were a great hunter, you bring home the bacon and everyone loves you and you kind of get, 4 wives. And then if you got a broken ankle and bad eyesight, you're not getting anything. Your evolutionary line won't continue, right? I'm talking about hunter-gatherer times. And then, in the modern day, obviously there's a lot of inequality, but the baseline has definitely risen a lot in, even the last 100 years, right? But the way that people compete now is just going to be on these extremely arbitrary status games, right? People are going to start playing status games in their different groups. And with the internet, I mean, it's just turbocharges the whole thing because you can find communities that you would have been segregated from previously, right? To your point, though, about some of the stuff that happens in the workplace, I'm actually writing something that's going to come out on Monday, and what I'm trying to do is kind of clarify, like, what are the actual behaviors that you see in the workplace and whether it's male and female coded, right? Like, because I think one of the things that is kind of frustrating with this whole thing is that like people will use words like masculine, feminization, all that stuff, but they don't actually take the time to define it. They don't take the time to say, okay, maybe you can have a primarily male workplace, but that workplace can still be feminized, right? And to your point, one of the problems that, in my opinion, I've observed that's very difficult to point with a feminized like failure mode is just a lot of the times it's not what happens, but what doesn't happen, right? It's like things that don't get done, decisions that don't get made.
Yeah.
And it's very sneaky. Like it has to do with kind of the language that I think that women tend to use more. Like, and the three that I generally identified as like first is kind of the passive voice, where it's like, oh, things happened, mistakes were made, and all that, right? Another one is like this technical terminology. It's like it's called ambiguous clusivity. So it's like um, Anuradha, like, hey, can we get this done? We need it for Friday. Whereas, like, if you're more straight up, you're like, hey, can you get this done? I need it for Friday, right? And so the way it's very sneaky language. There's plausible deniability, and like the main purpose with that sort of language is to sort of detach people from the decisions they make, right? And so what ends up happening is when things fail or things don't go as planned, it's very difficult to tie back decisions and failures to individual people.
Yeah. It's by design. So that, I think, is a primary way managerial capitalism works. So I'm not sure if this. So managerial capitalism predates women's mass entry into white collar work, right? The mode of managerial capitalism is avoidance of accountability because you are, as a collective, producing something highly efficiently. Though I think it was that this was kind of already there, this mode of accountability evasion, because it's a collectivist endeavor, I think, like working in a corporation. So, but I think with women's increased presence, I have also noticed that women in particular act that way, right? Men ask me directly, can you do this by some date? Women never do. And I also have to say we when I'm directing a project, even though I am the leader of the project, if there are women who perhaps don't like that style of communication. I think also there is a difference perhaps between linguistic/cultural feminization versus the feminization of the population. I don't know how much I buy the whole tipping point, but maybe I know the tipping point does matter. But and then I also think men adapt themselves to this rather feminized communication, accountability, evasion style, but it depends on where they are. I don't know if this is an occupational thing, but so in my line of work, I am now closer and closer to B2B sales. Which make whatever jokes you would like about that. But in that arena, it's rather objective. You either make money or you don't. So people are really comfortable with directive language, and men are very comfortable with me being directive and taking charge and things. Like they will just back up and let me do it. Whereas women get threatened when I do that. So Lurpa, what do you see in the workplace then from your experience, like given all we just discussed with regard to linguistic versus behavioral feminization?
Oh, a lot. So, I mean, when I was in the corporate world, you'd have the sandwich method, like if you want to criticize somebody, you have to first give them a compliment and then you give them the criticism and then you end it with another compliment so that nobody feels bad.
Mm-hmm.
In the yoga world right now, it's entirely female and there's no, but one thing about that I think is funny.
Yeah.
Teaching yoga in this sort of place. So one of my yoga teacher trainer instructors, she's trauma informed, right? So what that basically means is that in my estimation, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know why you'd sign up for a yoga class because you basically get to just do whatever you want. They invite you to do poses rather than tell you what to do. They say, if it feels right for you, take child's pose, whatever it is, it's like sickeningly sort of coddling.
Infantile. It sounds
very much so. And I've decided I do not want to be trauma informed as a teacher.
Yeah, good.
Because that's not what I'm trying to do. But I don't understand the purpose of going to a yoga class only to choose to not participate in it, So that's where it shows up in my current line of work. It all seems very silly, but you can't say that shit out loud. You cannot, not in that sort of environment, not with these types of suburban yoga ladies. Like
how do you do it? How do you do it? Because you seem like the total opposite of the wellness culture type. So I'm surprised that you are doing this and don't want to like bash your head against the wall.
Yeah, what I'm doing is just like waiting for the day when I have the kind of client base where I can go off and do my own thing and take people on like guided hikes and do yoga outside and stuff like that. That's my goal.
Nice.
But right now, I've got to do the studio thing and all that. But yeah, so now I got to play the game, as much as I can.
So I want to, Jonathan Rabinowitz left a comment, and I wish I could look at this on my computer, but I can't. I can't do the iPhone mirroring. As someone who works in public sector, it seems bewildering that corporate leaders don't just act and execute to get the most out of their people. Well, it depends on the level you're at. So now that I've reached the higher levels, execution is what matters, and it gets rewarded. But at the lower levels, where people are just kind of paper pushing, and because there are those jobs where people are just kind of there waiting to be told what to do. A lot of them, unfortunately, are women. There are, of course, men waiting to be told what to do. I've encountered plenty of those, but I've been in highly female-dominated work functions like marketing and recruiting. I've also been in highly male-dominated work functions, and I've written about this, that the highly male-dominated ones tend to be more comfortable just doing things than the female-dominated ones. And this drives me personally nuts because I am a doer. I mean, I am a thinker also, but I don't, and I also take accountability. Like I take risks. The other thing is risk taking. I think like, so along with the infantilization you're talking about, Lorpa, I think the risk aversion is part of that. It's almost like we keep ourselves behind by being unwilling to take risks and then not recognizing that men maybe get ahead because they are more risk tolerant, right? Like, what do you guys think about that?
Well, I think we do notice that, at least a lot of women notice that sometimes, but we also know in the back of our heads that if we become that risk taker, that we will be socially ostracized by the other women, maybe not by the men, but by the other women we will be. And that, illogical as it is, especially if you want to get ahead, that is going to be in the back of your mind. You might not want to actually cause that sort of social upheaval. So a lot of it is women's choices based on what their experiences are, though, of, working with other women, having that sort of dynamic between you and other women. There was one place where I worked at a bank where HR really was up in our department all the time because we had ongoing interpersonal drama. And it was just it was like one woman and one gay man who were like, I would legitimately call them bullies to the rest of the department. They were very mean all the time. They made people cry all the time. It was all very silly. This was a bank. This was like fraud operations in a bank. People couldn't keep their shit together. And our HR guy, he was actually a guy, but he was up there all the time. And I remember, we couldn't get anything done. Absolutely nothing could get done. The bullies actually, it turned out they got fired eventually because one of them was hiding a bunch of work that they, that needed to get done. No one could find it. It was all on him, so he hid it. That's when he got fired. But, it was things like that. Like that was probably one of the most, that was one of the more interesting jobs I had job-wise, like the actual job functions were interesting. I enjoyed investigating fraud, but that dynamic was what drove me out of the place after a year and a half, because even after those two were gone, it didn't get better. It was still what I noticed back then, that banks tended to be female dominated quite a bit, at least in operations where I was working.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it's kind of always been like that for me in office work. The only male dominated jobs I've had, I worked for Parks and Rec for the city of St. Paul for a while. That was all male dominated. Our break room smelled like a, mechanic shop. And, it was very manly in there. I did enjoy the environment though, even though it was very different for me, but it was interesting. It was more casual. So kind of rambling here, but yeah.
I think one of the interesting aspects, like with the whole discourse, especially on Substack, is that, and I don't know if you guys get this, but it's like you kind of get sucked into trying to defend ideas that you don't necessarily hold, because you start at least with the Helen Andrews piece, I agreed with some of the things that she said, some of the things that she didn't, I didn't agree with everything. And I think that she overstated her case, especially towards the conclusion where it's like, okay, women just join and then truth goes out the window. And it's like, that's a very straw man, opinion, right? And it's like, there's so many people that are going to be able to poke holes into that. So you end up trying to say, well, no. The thing that I was trying to point out is that, there's Overton windows. People have things that they accept and don't accept. And then whether it's through biology, whether it's through culture, whether it's through some interaction of the two, it seems like men are just more willing to say fucked up things, like, you know, for the sake of it. And women generally tend to have a more narrow bandwidth of, like, you know, the things that they're willing to tolerate and not tolerate. But that being said, it's not that men don't find certain things offensive, right? And I find it funny because the last week, there were kind of two things that were blowing up on my feed. The first is kind of the rise of like Nick Fuentes. And the second was, you know, that GQ, like Sydney Sweeney stuff where it's like, I couldn't, like, I just saw a rolling tide of like memes of like Sydney Sweeney answering to that, right? And the reason why it got so popular is because that is the behavior that a certain type of guy finds offensive, right? They can tolerate Nick Fuentes, right? They see him as a guy who's like internet native and he'll go off about like some random conspiracy theory. But they all have this experience of like a woman trying to like effectively lay a trap on them, or like trying to set them up to put their you know, kind of bite their tongue and say something that they don't necessarily mean, right? And what makes it so difficult is that there's a plausible deniability aspect to all of it, right? In my personal experience, I've been quite, I guess, quite lucky. Like, I mean, most of the places that I've worked have been like pretty chill. The stuff that we do, like, I mean, I am very honest in the workplace. If I don't know what's going on, I'll just say it. If I make a mistake, I'll do, hey guys, I fucked up. Here's how I'm going to fix it. And 99% of the time, nobody cares. The one thing that I do see that's female coded, that's kind of like difficult to work with, is like the firing squad technique of decision making. That's what I call it. But I don't know. Like, you know, if you have like a prisoner of war or whatever, they want to kill a guy. They don't send one guy. They set up like you know, 50 or whatever, 10 people to shoot them all at the same time. And there's some weird psychological thing where no one feels responsible, right? And I feel like that's kind of how, you know, like a lot of the decisions get made in the workplace, where it's like a person wants to make a decision, but they don't want to feel responsible for it. They get, you know, 20 people in a meeting together, and then it's like, oh, well, based on the meeting, this thing happened. And if it backfires, then it's like, well, maybe it was my mistake, but you guys all agreed to it, so you're kind of in on this as well, right? So it's kind of a diffusion of responsibility there.
And that is a hallmark of a feminized workplace, in my opinion. And that unfortunately does show up more when women are like involved. I worked in an all female marketing department. And the responsibility was never on a person, but like I was weird and I didn't fit because I was willing to do things and take responsibility for them, but I wasn't allowed to do that by the environment. So even when there's someone willing to take responsibility, the environment doesn't allow that person to do it, because then if that person does it and succeeds, presumably that person would also get some power or authority or what have you. And authority among women at work, in my opinion, must remain diffuse because of, again, the pressure to all be the same. And this comes from, again, evolutionary biology. Women know, or like women and girls know at an early age that they can't outperform their female peers or they will not have friends. And that has been true for me, unfortunately. I mean, I would say a lot of my female friends have fallen away, and I'm honestly kind of okay with it. Because I feel suffocated in a lot of those friendships. And I wanted to also actually address, you said plausible deniability. Like, that is kind of also the default way in which women communicate, which is also really frustrating because just to tell a story about my workplace experience. I was brought into my first consulting job by a woman who said, "Oh, I just want smart women around me." I should have known, that should have set alarm bells off in my head. Like that, that's not something that the women who will the worst will also be the ones to say, "I just want smart women around me." And that woman, then I was given two projects that were already read. This is two projects that are read. I was held to the same deadline for whatever reason. I, of course, did not meet that deadline because I was given no ramp up time and the projects were already read. I did end up delivering, but late. The deadlines were arbitrary anyway. No, the client hadn't imposed these on me. These were internally imposed for an unjustifiable reason. I had a male manager, technically speaking, but this woman was the practice director. She then destroyed my reputation from within, saying that I had ruined these 2 projects, along with the project manager and the other woman that was on the project. So 3 women. And there was a 4th too, actually, who claimed to be a technical architect who also was in on this. So 4 women fucked with my reputation internally. I kept asking, what have I done? Like, what are the performance items that I need to improve? Like, can you give me specifics in writing? My male manager kept trying to get answers out of them, he kept saying. And no one could give him answers, and no one could give me answers on what I needed to improve. Because, of course, it was a nothing burger. There was nothing to actually improve because I was asked, or rather, it was asked of my male colleagues, like my peers who were doing the same function, if I should be demoted. Right. My manager asked all these people whether I should be demoted, which is fucking embarrassing, first of all. All of them said no. One man had to say no twice when he was asked, fucking twice. So that's the sort of fuckery that a lot of women experience in the workplace. And that's also the sort of fuckery that you can't talk about openly, because then people just say, oh, well, that's just internalized misogyny. Oh, she's just a Republican. Or, there's always some excuse for it that pathologizes that individual woman. It's the resistance to structural thinking that really bugs me. It's that, even so, I did group therapy for a while, and I will just tell this last story and then turn it back to you guys. Did group therapy for a while. I would extrapolate my experiences to the structural social problems that they cause, right? Because these things are not random. They happen to women like us a lot. Me and Lurpa, like Lily's that type of woman. We keep experiencing the same thing. That's a pattern. That's not an individualized thing, but they're actually really resistant to pattern recognition. Have you guys found that there is this resistance to like structural thinking?
When you say
Yeah, for
pattern
sure.
recognition, definitely. I mean, and I think it goes beyond even male and female with the pattern recognition. I think that any time you notice a pattern that could possibly be offensive, it's going to be taken as offensive, or you're going to have the least charitable interpretation of your pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Like the pattern that the more women are in an institution, the more feminized it gets. That's a pattern you notice. And obviously we see the backlash from that. Yeah. Yeah, when it
Yeah, I mean,
comes to
that's
Go ahead, Rohan, sorry.
yeah, it's just part of like it's like the celebration parallax, right? Like you're not allowed to notice something unless it's in the form of celebration, right? You can't say, oh, there's a lot of women in this office, but you can say, wow, there's a lot of women in this. Like it's a very equal culture, right? So it has to be always framed in a positive light. Otherwise, it becomes like problematic. To your point, Anuradha, I think like a big part of like the dynamic of refusing to notice things on a systemic level is like another thing that I noticed, and I sort of mapped it as like female coded, which is kind of like feigned ignorance. Like it's just kind of, you pretend like you don't know what's going on,
Yeah.
right? And then what ends up happening is like I had like an interesting story. The story you were telling previously kind of reminded me of that, where basically the way that it worked is that we had deliverables for every Friday. So basically Monday you log in, me and my team, we kind of work together, right? It was me and then like this other lady. And so just the way that the project worked is that she would have to do her part first, then she would hand it off to me, and then I would have the remainder of the week to kind of finish off the deliverable, right? And so she kind of would take the first 4 days, right? She would spend like Monday through Thursday getting her part done. So it would be 50% done by the end of Thursday, and then I would have to rush to complete the last 50% by Friday, right? And so, there was this like in AI, there's kind of like this term called sandbagging, where, the language model pretends like it doesn't know what it's doing just so it can kind of get around certain parameters, right? And so I feel like it's the exact same thing. Like they would kind of sandbag their own piece just to kind of undercut you, because it puts me in a difficult situation, right? If someone comes to me and says, "Oh, how come you didn't have your deliverable for Friday?" The only way I can correctly address it is to throw someone else under the bus, right? So I either have to tell the truth, in which case I don't look like a team player, or I have to frantically rush 1 day out of the week, right? So 4 days out of the week, it's just pure boredom because I'm just waiting on this other person. And then 1 day out of the week, it's a frantic rush. And so, like, it's kind of a lose-lose situation, right? They kind of put you in that. But again, it's so
Ooh.
difficult because there's a plausible deniability.
Like,
It's
okay.
interesting.
Oh, go ahead, Laura.
Well, about just to bring it to another experience, this whole plausible deniability thing, it reminds me a lot, and I bring a lot of people I've talked to lately, I brought this back to Occupy because there's so many things that are parallel to it. But, the Occupy movement, I don't know how much you were familiar with it when it was happening, but very good. Okay. So, everyone did everything on a consensus-based model.
Oh,
so that's how we decided.
Can you explain that a little bit? Like what it looked like?
Yeah, so we'd have these general assemblies every single day, and anyone could come to them, any single person that was a part of Occupy. But it could be literally anybody from the street could walk into these meetings, and we'd have to take them seriously. Wow. And that's what ended up becoming the problem. And Minneapolis, as an occupation, was actually the last one to finally get rid of the full 100% consensus model, because all of the other cities realized before us that it wasn't feasible. But so, what happened is that, we'd be voting together on something probably inconsequential, like should we, endorse this particular action that we're planning or whatever. And these would go on for hours, and we'd have what was called a progressive stack. So if you wanted to talk, you got organized based on your skin color, your gender, your sexual orientation, etc. So white men who were straight were definitely last to be able to speak. Black or brown women, especially queer, were definitely the first to speak, Even when that got started, it was a bit controversial because in the first few days, it was actually a very cool sort of movement. But once the NGOs took over, and started infiltrating, everything changed. So everything was race-based, everything was gender-based. And when you actually did do the consensus model, I remember there was one guy named Bob. He was a Republican who ran for governor every single year. And no one paid attention to him, but he would come just to bother us. He was like the one random conservative who would come and exploit the system that we had for consensus. And he would break every single consensus that the rest of us had just to kind of prove a point. And you know what? He won. Like, we eventually abandoned it. But there was a lot of ganging up on people. There was a lot of just eventually just shutting people out because they weren't cooperative enough. A lot of them were men, of course. There were, women who were shut out of these as well, but a lot of them were men for sure, white men who had even the politest of disagreements with the system as it was. They were just written off as misogynists naturally. Of course. So, the movement ended up not doing much as a result,
Erosion of standards, right? Like, that's what I'm hearing in your story, is that feminization is also about the erosion of standards in the name of inclusivity.
Oh, and one more thing. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but
please, go ahead.
There was one other part that I remember being confronted by a group of angry anarchists once, because I was on the media committee. So I was doing social media and giving interviews on TV and stuff. And one of the reasons, a side note, that I was chosen to be one of the representatives who gave the TV interviews was that I was a female. So they wanted a female and someone of color. So it was me and this other girl. I shouldn't say girl, she was older than I was, but this other woman, she was a Black woman. So the two of us were like the face of the Minneapolis Occupy for a little while, at least on the news, because they wanted to make sure nobody looked like a white man. But anyway, during this, sorry, I lost my train of thought when I went on that tangent, but yeah, anyway, so, the media committee. So, since we did the Facebook and everything, someone had, there was a group of these anarchists that came up to us. And at that time, I was kind of anarchist curious, I was like, oh, I kind of like this ideology. But anyway, these anarchists came up very angrily. And all I can remember is a sea of dyed black hair. It was funny. But anyway, so they were like, we think that everybody should have access to the Facebook page for Occupy MN. That's what it was called at the time. And me and another guy who were on the media committee said, no, we need to have some standards there, like for, grammar, to make sure that there's like at least agreement as to what we're putting out on the official social media channels. And she said, well, that's elitist. It doesn't matter what the grammar's like as long as it can be understood. She didn't win, like we didn't let her. We didn't let her on the team.
Oh,
but
good.
that was like a huge chunk of that movement, was like, don't be elitist because it could push somebody out. And this always affects women and Black and brown people for some reason, because I guess women and Black and brown people are incapable of being, grammatically correct and intelligent.
So much infantilization, like it kills.
Yes, absolutely.
So I've got an interesting story on that. Speaking of Occupy.
Yeah.
Actually, sorry, 1 second, Rohan. I will. I wanted to just tell everyone to, if you have questions or comments, just drop them in the chat. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I was so I was actually an intern on Wall Street when that happened. So it would be the funniest thing, right? Because it was actually a bunch of like older ladies, like, like these sort of granny looking people. And like they would like come up to me as I'm going to work, and they would be like, do you agree with what you're doing to like this underclass? And I'm like, lady, I spend like 4 hours of my day like photocopying like random PDF files and like moving it into some other um location, right? Like I had the most mind-numbingly boring job out of all of this, but it was just funny to see, because like I would say every day for about a week, there would be like at least like 5 to 10 people just kind of camping in front of like the place that I worked. I would walk in and they would be like, like they would try to tell me, like, they're looking at me like I'm responsible for like fractional reserve banking. Like I didn't come up with this. I had this job. I got this job for like 2 weeks ago, right? So but yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, wow, like your guys' experiences are like way different than mine. I have a much more chill workplace. People just leave each other alone, and like they're too introverted to get into confrontation, I feel like. But yeah, there's one thing that I was interested in getting your opinions on, because I think like in terms of like it's hard to make a generalization, because it's like I think it's like sector by sector, like how the feminization actually kind of presents itself in all these different areas, right? So for example, like you can see it in like, for example, Hollywood, right? You can see like certain TV shows and movies and all that stuff. And you can like, it's supposed to be in the medieval times, but everyone looks like a gender diverse cast of people. And like, it's like a very homogenous, it looks like a billboard ad for like milk or something. Right. And, so that's gonna like, in my opinion, that has like its own way of manifesting, and then in psychology, it has its own way of like, because the way that I feel right now is that a lot of like the therapy and psychology culture, like the terms, the Instagram therapy speak, like people kept telling me that I'm like valid for saying what I want to say. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I'm a very like blunt person, right? And it's just weird here. You're so valid for saying that, right? And but yeah, and then like you see it in maybe like fiction, right? Because you see it in like fiction writing, where now everything it's you go to any bookstore and it's like a minotaur who's like 6'7" and he's got a $500 million bank account, and like every book is like that. And it's like, okay, so you see the feminization taking place, but it's not the same at every single domain, right? So that's why it's so hard to say, okay, what do you think feminization looks like? It has so many different applications, right?
So that's interesting. So okay, you're saying you were an intern during Occupy Wall Street, like during that actual period.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, wow. Okay. So I was right. You are kind of Gen Z. That tracks. Or sorry, like not Gen Z. I don't actually know your age. Just to be clear, we have been talking for a long time in a group chat, and I still don't actually know anything about you, which I think is hilarious, actually.
16.
You're 16 years old. Got it. Yes, you talk like. Okay, so actually, let's pause and look at the chat real quick. Okay, so Siddesh mentioned the feminization essay. Yes, Siddesh, we did talk about it, and she, Helen Andrews, made a lot of bad arguments. We talked about it perhaps before you joined. Let's see. Any other questions? One time, a female professor criticized me for not liking 90s R&B. Wow, that's quite something. My female boss tries to chastise me for working exactly 9 to 5 and not needing to be in the office for 6:30. Yeah, that's a whole other thing where I feel like there's a lot of micromanagement that happens from it's not that it doesn't happen by men, but it actually happens more often by women. It's happened to me by women exclusively, but that just happens to be me. Have you guys been micromanaged? And who did it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think anyone's ever micromanaged me because, I mean, I don't know if you get this impression, guys, but I can be a little bit blunt. So I don't exactly use, I don't exactly like mince my words or anything. So I'm pretty honest about like, when I made a mistake, when I have no idea what's going on. What's really interesting is like there will be a Microsoft Teams meeting or like a WebEx meeting or whatever it is that you use, a Slack channel, and there'll be like 30 people on the call. And I would say like 27 of those people will have no idea what's going on, right? They're using acronyms that no one's ever heard
Yeah.
of, business processes that is not relevant to your department. And they're just going off for like 15 minutes, right? And so I often find that I'm the guy who's like, hey, can we pause for a second? What does this mean? What does that mean? What, like, explain it to me like I'm a child, right? And what's interesting is that every single time there will be a person who messages me is like, thank you for saying that, right?
Yeah.
That's so, like I had no idea what's going on. It's like, dude, you can step in at any point in time as well, right? Like, and so I think the problem is that people are just, it comes back to this status game thing, right? And I think it manifests between men and women differently, but it's this idea that you're so afraid to look like you don't know what you're doing, right? You have to kind of maintain optics. You have to show that, I'm a competent person. I know exactly what's going on. But in the stuff that I do, like I'm kind of like a cross between a tech dork and a finance dork. Things are changing all the time, right? So it's like it's impossible to keep up, right? So you're always going to be learning. There's always going to be stuff that you don't know. Just admit it, right? And I think that, it kind of manifests like we talked about the male version, but to shit on the guys for a second, the things that I feel that like guys tend to do is that they do this thing where they use a lot of like technical jargon in order to make themselves sound a lot smarter and a lot more sophisticated than they actually are, right? Like, yeah, I see it all the time on Substack where it's like someone's just making like a very basic point, but then like, instead of saying, oh, people sometimes copy one another, you'll get some like economist who's like, oh, Girardian mimetic paradigms allow for cultural subclassing that can method overload our cultural software. And you're like, I have no idea what the fuck that means, right? They just want to use a bunch of like words to make themselves sound really high IQ. You see that a lot with the rationalists and like a lot of the philosophy guys. They just want to like make themselves smarter or appear smarter than they actually are. And I think that's kind of like something that's very, very male coded.
Yeah.
And then, like I think in terms of the direct fighting, right? Like in terms of like the way that I always think about it is that the low IQ psychopaths, they end up in jail, right? That's why mostly the jails are mostly men. The high IQ psychopaths, they end up in the boardroom, right? That's it's the same energy. It's just, a few more IQ points, right? It's the exact same, just in two different directions, right? Which is, I find it so funny that, women want more representation in that specific sliver of the company because it's like, yeah, you want to be like basically a psycho, but you're never going to outcompete men in being that like driven psycho, like the type of person who makes $200 million a year and is like disappointed because it could have made $500 million.
Yeah, it's not how we're wired. Like I only recently became rather ambitious. Okay, ambition perhaps matching my partner's ambition. I actually had a really low opinion of my own abilities until pretty recently, and that I think has to do with actually my ambition being dampened in female dominated work environments. Like I place that at the feet of women for eroding my self-esteem to the point where I didn't think I could get where I actually am right now. And honestly, my female managers, the ones who have been good to me, kept me in maintenance mode. They wouldn't push me forward because that means attaching themselves, like attaching their reputation to me personally. Men are far more willing to do that. Now, granted, I'm sure some of that is optically related because pushing me forward makes them look good. Like I check diversity boxes. They may not be consciously doing it, but I'm sure that figures into it. That said, you can only get so far checking diversity boxes. You do have to display competence. So while, that may be a factor, I think a lot of women perhaps use the mere fact of male sponsorship to invalidate my, like, what I'm doing. I also noticed that when women get put in competition, the environment naturally puts women in competition with each other. And that is pathologized, even when other people are doing it. So I'm not trying to compete, but other people are comparing us anyway, right? So then that person ends up feeling insecure. And that insecurity ends up being my problem to manage, even though it's really not. So I end up trying to dim myself to not make another person look perhaps less capable. And that is something that only happens with women. And I wanted to go back to both of you made the point about conflict not being allowed. You're not allowed to have open conflict in the corporate world, or just in general. Laura, I'm sure you see this in yoga. The lack of the stricture on open conflict, you always get told that's unproductive if you try to hold someone accountable, which is perception management over actually doing things. A keystone of feminization is optimizing for perception rather than output or outcomes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying output for its own sake, but like actual measurable outcomes. It is perception management that ends up ruling the managerial capitalist workplace, I think.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up another topic that's somewhat related. We talked about it a little bit earlier about how the people who are talking about this so much, at least against the concept of feminization, haven't actually worked in these workplaces. They don't have that experience. And part of me, now I don't think that this is entirely true for reasons I'll get into in a second, but I wrote this thing about how so many of these feminist complaints, this was months ago, are really just like rich people problems. Like I can't wear the same outfit more than, twice, like more than one event or whatever.
Yeah.
And part of me wonders how much of this, at least in certain types of workplaces, is a similar dynamic, because I remember hearing, the wage gap, for example. I mean, it's dishonestly portrayed. It's not,
Yeah.
you're making less money for the same job kind of thing, like people say. And I knew that from the beginning, because every job that I had was the type of wage job where every single person made the same amount when you went in. That's what they started you at. And then you got your 14-cent raise or whatever at the end of the year, maybe. So I thought, no, these are for people who already make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that are just upset that they're not like in the C-suite, but they're still like doing very well for themselves. And maybe they make slightly less, but these problems aren't for your average working class American. They're for, the wage gap conversation, that is. They're for the people with like a more serious career trajectory who are looking to be at the upper end of their environment, of their institution. And I wonder how much of this is playing out the same way with the feminization debate, because I think that there may be some cases where, there are a lot of these places don't notice the feminization, possibly because they are, say, pink collar or, blue collar working class types of environments where a more feminized work environment actually suits itself well to, whatever the institution does. God, even some of that though, like, yoga seems like one of those things, but it's still infuriating to have to deal with some of the choices of language that they want me to use and things like that. They don't want me to use Sanskrit either for anything because, oh God, that drives me.
So many thoughts on that. Oh, Rajiv is here, actually. I think he might be still here.
Oh, yeah. I saw him in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. So
in Minneapolis, they wanted us to, but out here, they don't. In the DC Metro, they're like, no Sanskrit. That'll scare people.
What? Why?
Yeah, they just think that it's too alienating because people won't understand you. I'm like, well, that's not really how you do it. You don't just bark out Sanskrit words when you're teaching a class full of white people, like you integrate it. And and so to the point that I knew a lot of Sanskrit names for poses before I ever started yoga teacher training. It was very easy and just integrated well into the classes back in Minneapolis. But yeah, out here, not so much, like I don't know, there's one pose, Urdhva Hastasana. They just call it high mountain, and it drives me crazy. Like, that sounds so stupid.
It literally means hands up asana. That's
yeah.
Oh my fucking God. Okay.
Yeah. High mountain.
I am pro using the Sanskrit terms if you know what they mean and can reasonably pronounce them. Because honestly, white women especially have removed anything Hindu from yoga, and it really fucking bugs me.
Yeah.
Yoga is like, I know Hinduism is a bad umbrella word, but yoga is not Buddhist. It's not vaguely Eastern. It is from an Indic philosophical tradition, a specific one. And you must, I'm sorry, if you're going to teach yoga, one should acknowledge that, because that is appropriative. They worry about the wrong things when it comes to appropriation. They don't think about, oh, how am I erasing the history of this thing? And this happens a lot to Hindu ideas. They get slotted as vaguely Buddhist or Eastern or whatever. They get stripped of their Indic origin, and it just kind of really bugs me. Anyway, sorry, that's a total side point.
Oh no, that's all right. And they have incorporated into yoga teacher training, a philosophy section. So I mean, I read there's that book, but not the Upanishads. The you and Rajiv were just talking about this book,
Yoga Sutras.
The one with the battle.
Mahabharata?
No.
Ramayana?
Bhagavad Gita.
Here's my book.
The Gita as part of
Gita.
Okay.
Yes, the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
So we had to read that in yoga teacher training. And my first one, that one was led by a man. It was very, very different than the yoga teacher training I did that was led by two women. Anyway, so we read the Bhagavad Gita, and we read, the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. And this one was different. We had like these talking sessions, to talk about our feelings about things. And there was something kind of nice about being like in this group of women when I'm usually surrounded by men, because like you, I don't really have very many female friends either for the same reasons. But at the same time, I was like, this is what it's like. I don't like it. It's there wasn't much. Because it was, they didn't want to be appropriative, but all of the words that they chose to use instead just screamed appropriation, because it was just like whitewashing and therapy speaking all of yoga, as though even though you just learned about all of this history, this philosophical history of where yoga came from, we're still just rewording it to be more palatable to suburban white ladies whose husbands are deployed or whatever is going on in this town.
Okay, can we talk about discipline then, actually, because that raised a point, because Bhagavad Gita is all about discipline, emotional discipline, and the strength to do what is correct but incredibly difficult, right? It has a lot of a lot of parallels with Stoic philosophy and just Hellenistic, Hellenistic sort of self-help type strains of thought, which then they weren't self-help at the time. Like Marcus Aurelius wrote meditations for himself, and that this philosophy and then Buddhism and probably Hindu ideas got folded into dialectical behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. I have spent a lot of time in fucking therapy, so I think it's kind of crazy that I have noticed that part of feminization is actually the erosion of personal discipline, and then framing discipline as somehow oppressive. Along with that comes logic and reason as also oppressive. What are your experiences with this, Rohan? Why don't we go back to you?
Well, loosely speaking, this actually ties into something I took a note about, right? Because we see that a lot of the psychology has become feminized. Like, I think right now it's 80% female, or at least female graduates.
Yeah.
And like, it just seems like it's becoming more and more female as kind of time goes on. But what's interesting is that, if you go to like the biohacker community, it's a lot of like bros and like bro science and people talking about like neural pathways and like, getting up at 4:30 just to like dunk your face into like a bucket of ice and then like stare at the sun until you go blind or whatever. But it's like, a lot of the biohacker stuff, if you look at the principles underneath, it's a lot of psychology. It's a lot of like
Yeah.
the whole DBT and CBT stuff. It's just kind of repurposed for like a different crowd. Well, I think this is kind of one of the terminal conditions of male flight, where it's like they kind of leave one domain, but then you kind of see this other domain kind of pop up that kind of runs in parallel, and it seems to be the exact same stuff underneath the hood, just male coded. Coming back to something you said, Lirpa, like about a lot of people, like I see this a lot in on Substack, where, I mean, if you would believe it, mostly women, they were talking about how they don't really see the great feminization. And it's like, well, I mean, I'll give you a story that kind of ties back into this. When I was in college, I would go to a bar, right? I would take the subway. I'd go to this bar. I would stay there for until 3 in the morning. And then in order to catch the last train, I would just cross through all these like back alleys. And I would do that every day at like 3 in the morning. And I didn't think about it, right? And so then, I could easily go like, cause obviously one time I went with a woman, and she was kind of giggling by the time we got to the station. She was like, "This is so dangerous. I don't know why you're doing this." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I do this every single time." Right. And so it's like, for me, I never thought about it. I'm like, what do you mean back alleys? Like, back alleys aren't dangerous. Like, going out late at night, it's not dangerous. I don't see it. Right. And it's like, well, yeah, of course I don't see it, because it doesn't impact me the same way that it would impact the two of you. Right. And so coming back to like the whole point of like, it's mostly upper middle class white women talking about like, well, I don't see the great feminization. Like, it's not happening.
It's like a fish not realizing it's in water.
We need more. In Persuasion, there was someone else who wrote that feminization hasn't gone far enough, and I lost all respect for Persuasion after I read that, because that was another bad argument. Did you guys read that?
No.
Yeah. I remember glossing over it and kind of skipping to the top comment, just being like, yeah, I don't think you're getting the point.
Same category error. Okay, let's look at the comments real quick, because there's some long ones.
You guys,
of course,
I
can't
be right back. Okay.
Yeah. I was gonna do the same thing. Actually, why don't we take a quick break?
Yeah, we'll take a quick intermission.
Yes,
Well,
quick intermission. All right. Yeah, yes, you feel free to monologue, please, because people love you.
Perfect. All right, guys, you're stuck with me. Let's see. Let's look over some notes. One thing I did wanted to mention was that I think John Carter briefly joined the chat. I don't know if he's still here, but he's got a great article called Academia as Women's Work. And as far as I can tell, like, based on everything that I've seen, he's the only one that's pointed out like this very basic fact. And it kind of comes to this idea of credentialism. Anuradha likes to talk about credentialism a lot, but I think there's a very simple point that, in my opinion, is very obvious, but no one really makes it that much aside from John Carter. And it's the idea that, women are overtaking, quote unquote, these institutions. They're becoming 60%, 65% female, especially in the higher education level. But when you actually drill down at the individual degrees, it's not like for lack of a better term, it's like they're taking on easier degrees, right? Like, it's like gender studies, humanities, that kind of stuff. And if we're just being honest, like, it's not the same as going into like math or physics or like engineering. Again, it's not to sort of denigrate those fields. It's just there's a different bar of entry, right? And so, like, if I had to compare, like, there's two people, one person who has like a master's degree in like physics, and someone else who dropped out of year 3 in like someone who has a master's degree in like communication studies versus someone who dropped out of like their physics undergrad after year 3. I would still take the physics undergrad dropout, right? Because he was just playing a much harder game, right? And so it's like, why is that? Why is it that, men kind of go into these more difficult fields? Well, it's just because our personal status is more tied up in our jobs. It's more tied up in the amount of money we make, right? That's just a hard fact of life. And in order to make more money, you got to go into certain fields, right? And I think, like, on average, women, again, they have that pressure, just not to the same degree, right? They can go and get sort of like an English literature major degree, show that they have the piece of paper. And so it drives to this very basic idea that, the reason why women nowadays are more credentialed is because they go into these easier fields. So it's almost like a counter signal, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of that you caught,
I
on,
caught
but
Okay, so I want to riff on that actually. So you're right. Women find men attractive who are competitive and ambitious. But then you're right. Physics degrees are just STEM degrees are just harder. It was like I made it difficult for myself by taking actually difficult classes. But it was still very stupidly easy. College is actually stupidly easy for most people. And I don't know why the credential even value. It really should have deeply had to work. And so in engineering, a man in engineering had to work a lot harder than a woman in taking an English, like doing an English major. That's just a fact. I mean, I know lots of people who switched majors because the humanities are, of course, easier to get a degree in. You just have to breathe and like get B's or C's, and it's like stupidly easy to get B's. So women want men to compete, to gather resources, to be ambitious. They find that attractive. But then they also want to compete with men, but then also don't want to compete on a level playing field. So feminization is partly reducing standards or entirely eroding them so women can compete on just having credentials because 3 years in max, that's how long your degree matters and what it was in, right? The rest is all what you make of it and what skills you gather. But this is something that the women who run HR and the women who push DEI are unwilling to recognize, that credentialism not only is selecting for mediocrity, it's also keeping out, for example, okay, so the I got into the field that I did because of a woman who didn't have a degree. I know several other women who are technical and don't have degrees. They had to work harder because they didn't have degrees. Now, who are the initial gatekeepers of this process? It is women in HR. Like HR is something percent women. So if the initial gatekeepers are women, who's keeping qualified women out? It's women. I mean, the lack of standards in most of these jobs, like, okay, so if you're going for like a marketing position, what standards will what standards will your performance be evaluated? That's very unclear. I've been in marketing and I know that there are not fucking objective standards, especially in a large corporation that has lots of money to waste, right? In the years following the financial crisis, there was so much money going around. Oh, and this goes back the affluence thing that we were talking about in the very beginning. So having read the Affluent Society, that kind of changed my perspective on all of this, because increasing affluence is also a type of feminization, right? Because you're able to indulge in luxury more. This affects both men and women. Increasing affluence makes you highly comfortable, and comfort erodes standards. So I don't know if either of you, I know, Rohan, we've talked about Amusing Ourselves to Death, which I finally read, and holy shit, that was a book that was the linchpin of everything I had been reading and thinking about. I just finished it last week, and I feel like my brain is going a million miles a minute because of
Nice. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that is something to do book talk on. And then I'm also rereading Brave New World, which Postman references extensively. And that is about an affluent, highly comfortable society that engineered for like minimum friction. They have a whole caste system based on like engineered engineered intelligence, right? And like brainwashing. And the point is that a society doesn't erode because of force. A society erodes because it is highly comfortable and unwilling to tolerate any friction. And so you just end up floating through life. And I feel like a lot of women end up floating through life. But we as a society also, just men too. Men do this too. Like they just kind of default coast. My ex-husband did that. I mean, that's just a fact. So what do you all think about this like ontological feminization phenomenon?
I mean, I feel like it's going to get disrupted, to be honest, because, now we've got these large language models and they're kind of coming in. And as far as I can tell, to put it bluntly, like it's taking away a lot of, middle manager jobs.
Yeah.
It's taking a lot of jobs where it's like you go in and like, you have a matcha latte at like 10 a.m. Then you like go on the treadmill. Somehow you do a yoga session in the middle of your workday and then like,
Massage.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, there's a whole bunch of these jobs that are like just nominally tedious enough that you previously needed someone to be there. And like, to put it very bluntly, like what deindustrialization did for low IQ guys, the AI, stuff is going to do for, low
Yeah.
IQ women, right?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
there's a certain suite of jobs where, back in the day, 1950s, 1960s, you didn't have a whole lot of skills. You came out, you were 18 years old, like you couldn't, multiply or do anything that's like way beyond your capacity, but you could like, hold a screwdriver, screw in like some car door for something. You do that for 40 years, collect your pension, wife and kids, and you're good to go, right? But those jobs are gone, right? And so I think, again, to once more reference like something John Carter wrote about, he wrote about like the AI kind of sweeping over especially academic institutions, right? Because people are just finding you can write all of your essays with ChatGPT, and if you don't use it like a dumbass, like you just check every so often like what they're referencing and kind of double check the links, that'll kind of get you by in a lot of these humanities degrees, right? And so I think with that, putting my fingers crossed and kind of hoping that higher education, and especially the early part of the workforce, kind of reverts back what it was meant to be for, which is like, you should be ready to go into the workforce by the time you leave high school. And then if you want to get anything over and above that, then it's kind of like, it's great, but it's now for your personal development, right?
Yeah.
It should be for, like actually something over and above, right? Because what ends up happening is it's like anything, right? It's credential inflation. It's sort of like this.
It's feminized.
Now, when everybody has it, none of it is valuable. So now you have PhDs who can't get jobs.
Yes. And I got a PhD, and I'm so glad I didn't. Credentialism, Lurp, I'll hand it over to you, but credentialism is a type of feminization, I have noticed. And yes, we were talking. I had also written about this, how AI is going to disproportionately affect women in functions like marketing, customer success, like all these ancillary functions that are not making actual things, that are communication and relationship based. That is then going to probably push a lot of them into the independent, like small business wellness space. And I must say, like, okay, so last Blue Dog mentioned that I promoted 2 talented women to management positions, but then they wanted to stay ICs. Like, this is part of the problem. Like, this is a set of choices women make. This is not on men, in my opinion. And I'm sorry, but like, there are a lot of women who have corporate jobs who don't have the skills or the willingness to take risks or the ability to take accountability. And a lot of them might actually be better off running small businesses, which is to say, the small business economy is something that should grow in this era of like intense managerial capitalism. I think that's actually a good thing for women because it also allows flexibility that we want. Like, shit, I wouldn't be working if I didn't have to. And I hate to say that, but I just like really don't want to. I would rather spend all of my time writing. I would do something like I would do contract work. Like I don't need to work a full-time job. And that has been incredibly freeing to me to realize that I don't actually need to do that for my sense of identity. But there are a lot of women for whom the corporate job is actually a status thing, like the job itself, not anything they do in the job, just the mere fact of having the job. And then it also occurred that a lot of these companies that we fetishize, like, Google, Meta, whatever, all of these companies, they take on prestige to work for precisely because they are prestigious lifestyle brands. So the corporation you work for ends up being your lifestyle brand, which is like a ridiculous way to structure your identity. Lurpa, what do you think as someone who is independent and in the wellness space?
Well, I think you're right on that. Expanding like small businesses, I was thinking about this a lot. There's another essay by Darby Saxby. I know she's been pretty critical about the feminization thing, but she wrote an article before all this came out regarding, it was like the division of household labor. And what she mentioned was really interesting to me because, and it's something I've heard before, but in other countries where financial stability is more universal, and I believe Denmark was her example. In Denmark, a lot more women with children in particular work part-time. And they're able to do this. Some fathers do too, but not many of them. But this is possible because they have an infrastructure that supports it. And any of those countries where women are able to actually choose for reasons of, their own desire, what they want to do, rather than like what's financially necessary. You see a lot more women in more traditional spaces. Like you see more women choosing to stay home, to be stay-at-home mothers, to pursue, like for me, for the last 2 years, once I quit my job, my most recent job at the post office, and decided at first I was going to go into coding, and I did some coding classes, but then I did the yoga and personal training route instead. But during that time, it it became both easier and more enjoyable for me because besides starting to write on Substack more, besides doing like whatever studying I needed to do, which didn't take a ton of my time, I had so many other projects. Now I was writing more all of a sudden. I was volunteering more. I was doing more projects. I was making stuff that I could sell, like, other wellness products like bath salt, stuff like that, yoga mat spray, whatever it is. I think that is a lot more suitable for a lot more women's temperaments, and a lot of the reasons why so many of us, the only reason I had so many spreadsheet jobs and so many banks and all these other different types of work is because I had to, there was no other option. Like whether I was on my own or even like with my ex-husband or a partner or something where we were splitting expenses, I still needed a job. There was and I don't have children and I wasn't planning on having children. So the idea of being just like a stay-at-home wife sounded a little silly to me, even though that's kind of what I'm doing right now because I don't teach yoga a lot, but at least not yet. But if we had this sort of support system, and this is something that goes a little more political than I think, this is more of a polarizing solution. But I mean, if we had this sort of political environment where it was possible for women to work as little as they wanted to, because some of this was based on surveys. Women said, yes, I'd like to work either part-time or not at all after they had children. Most women don't have the kinds of high-powered careers that they're passionate about, that they really want to succeed in. A lot of women had the jobs like I had, like an operations manager at some bank or whatever, something that honestly took me like 3 months to figure out how my job even fit into the bank as a whole, just jobs like that seemed like bullshit jobs and kind of were. I think you'd see a lot of this stuff correct itself more naturally, just because women would have more options. And maybe these women who aren't so competent in these roles wouldn't feel the need to, even be in those roles in the first place. They wouldn't subject themselves to the kind of competition that they weren't interested in anyway.
Makes sense. Yeah, it does. And so that brings up the gender equality paradox is what you're referring to, really, which is that in more gender equal societies, and we see that here, we see that in Scandinavia, lots of people have written about this. Yeah. There are women make different choices, which end up, they end up staying home. They end up in lower status careers, which is fine. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
For women, it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, it doesn't.
People don't judge you as harshly if you don't have a high status career. At least men don't. Some women might, but
at least okay. So here is where we think we take on Richard Reeves's argument because I think he's been making also a lot of questionable arguments lately, where he thinks that the solution to this is more men going into heal professions, which is just never going to happen. It's just not happening. Why would they do that? There's no incentive to do that. And Rohan, you also wrote about this. So, and then there's also the problem of status between men and women. So if women want a higher status man, we are now reaching a point where there aren't enough men who make more than the women with corporate jobs, right?
Yeah.
And then so a lot of women are ending up alone. And that is I'm not saying that they need to like change what they go for. The problem is that there aren't enough men. And feminization is a huge reason there aren't enough men to marry these women who want to have partners and have children, right? And so now the question is this a zero-sum game? We actually need, for women's benefit and children's benefit especially, we need more men to make more money. And so at that point, what is left other than correcting the imbalance and having and somehow creating a situation where we have more men who rise to the top, because the fewer high status men there are, the worse they're going to behave, right? And that is, again, like the situation is actually bad for women to have such few high status men that many women are going for. And I can't blame them for doing that. But then the uncomfortable question is raised. This is a zero-sum thing. Like, for men to make more money, women have to make less money. I don't know. What do you guys think? Rohan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like, at the end of the day, I can tell you, just as a personal anecdote, like, when previously, like, well, just say a company was hiring, you would hire or potentially hire like a man or a woman, and you would have to compare their resumes. And so there was enough, like, they were pretty much equal in terms of like the actual qualifications they had. Like, they would do well in their interviews. They would, meet the technical requirements. They both seemed like they were a good culture fit. And so really, like, when I would say like 5-6 years ago, the tiebreaker would just go to the woman, right? Because it was like, it's a good optical look, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've seen it from the inside, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so what I can tell you is that now, like, you won't see it anywhere, you won't see it published anywhere, but you'll start to slowly see it in the opposite direction. Like, you're kind of seeing like, okay, no one's going to say anything out loud, no one's ever going to like declare anything, but you'll see like slowly now the tiebreakers go in the opposite direction, right? So, I mean, the way that I see this playing out is like, again, it's kind of based on what domain and stuff that we're talking about, right? If we need this sort of leveling out to happen, then it kind of depends on what specifically like the incentives are in that specific area, right? So again, like I said, Hollywood, TV shows, video games, right? These are kind of media things. And so if we're seeing, the girl boss trope in like literally every single piece of media and all that stuff, guys are not going to show up to that.
So
They're
tired.
going to go bankrupt, and then something else is going to take them.
I don't want to watch that.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots of women don't want to. Lurpa, you don't want to watch that, I
I
assume.
hate that shit, man.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, like, not to make it political, but like, I think that's exactly what we saw in like the 2024 election, right? Because all the media was slanted in one way, like all the major news outlets, all the major publications, right? And so what we saw is that guys just kind of abandoned that specific media, right? They went to
Yeah.
to YouTube, they went to Substack, they went to Twitter or X, right? So like, what ends up happening is that, I mean, over the course of maybe 5 to 10 years, one way or the other, this kind of, I feel like it kind of corrects itself. I don't know. Like, I feel like with a lot of these things with like the gender debates, I kind of feel the same way with like these fat influencers. Like, you can only be 500 pounds for so long, right? Like, you're 500 pounds at 25. By 35, that problem solves itself one way or the other, right? Like, you just kind of, so then like, I feel like it's the same thing with a lot of these, with a lot of like the discourse around like, finding someone who's in your own league and all that. It's like, listen, to put it bluntly, you either have to lower your standards or kind of just accept that you're going to not find the person that you look for, right? And that's kind of what we saw early in the like a few months ago with that whole like, men, where have you gone, right? It's like, it's still there. Like, it's just,
my God.
you just got to be more realistic. Like, that's pretty much it.
If you can't tolerate men's like way of communicating, then they're just not going to want to be around you. I mean, I don't know. I used to take a lot of offense to things men said when I was a woke feminist, and life was pretty tiring, and I was pretty annoyed. And it's just
tiring is the right way to put it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing. Tiring is the right way to put it.
Yeah.
It's a very tiring experience. It's exhausting.
How did you meet your husband, or what? Because you and I have talked about how we have been married before, so I'm just curious what that experience was like for you. However much you feel like sharing.
Oh, my first husband.
What's the difference between them? Actually, that's what I'm curious.
The difference is drive. Absolutely. Yeah. So, like my first husband, when we met, he had a job and he was going to school, and he's very, very smart. He's a very intelligent guy. And he was going to school for like, God, what was it? Well, he was in school for chemistry, but he wanted to go for like the philosophy of chemistry. It was very interesting, and it was like right up his alley. Anyway, but as soon as we started dating, he just like abruptly quit his job and moved into his parents' basement. And I didn't see that as the red flag that it was. I mean, I was like 24, so it didn't really matter to me that much anyway. But that was just then another 4 years of me just like scrambling to pay all the bills because he couldn't hold a job for more than like 6 months at a time. And he'd, be drunk or stoned for most of it. And so that fell apart. Yeah, that fell apart right after during the Occupy thing, actually. I was involved with that, and that just sort of propelled me to change things, and so we divorced. But my second husband, no, he's a very driven person, and very different from anyone that I used to be with. Like, I would always go for like the starving artist archetype kind of guy, My husband is not that. Like, he's a musician. He traveled, like he was in a touring band for a while and stuff, but he's also in the military, and his job is military related now out in the DC area. So he's got more of that sort of aura about him. He's more reliable in that sense.
So you bring up points of like, what does masculinity mean? So you pointed out drive, sort of discipline, right? What was the third thing that you just said?
Well, he's
reliability.
Reliable. Yeah.
Reliable. Okay. These three things are not like things exclusively men should have. We should just all have them, which was a point that I was making in my own feminization response to all of this discourse, is we women need to have more masculinity in us that's integrated, and stop leaning so deeply toward the feminine pole. Like, you need some balance between these two polarities, and everyone has both in them. I'm more masculine oriented, cognitively speaking, and in communication style. And that it took me a long time to accept this about myself and stop trying to fit in, because women just kept punishing me for this.
Right.
Because I don't speak like a child, and a lot of female speech, frankly, sounds infantile to me. The way we
does,
right? Like, there's no erudition, there's no nuance. It just, we are rewarded among each other for sounding like children. Men are not telling us to sound like children, right? Like, and then the other thing, actually, I was looking up. It's actually women who judge women's looks more harshly than men do, because men kind of have a binary, like attracted, not attracted, whereas women are scrutinizing every little thing about your appearance, which then encourages us to algorithmically, like, because we're all just on fucking Instagram, to then do all these fucking procedures to make ourselves look more like children, right? That and then so women who don't want to do these procedures end up paying a penalty for not doing them and daring to just age naturally.
Right. Yeah, and that's true. And I mean, I say this hypocritically because I just got Botox yesterday, but but what are you going to do? But yeah, that's the thing too, is that what I find interesting is that, yes, women will completely judge the appearance of other women much more harshly, but only behind their backs. Because one other thing that I've noticed is that I don't believe women when they tell me that they think I'm pretty or beautiful or anything like that, ever. Because something that I've noticed is that they will tell literally anybody the same exact thing when you can tell that that person is objectively just simply not that attractive. And I'm like, so is that how you see me? So I just don't believe them. I just simply don't. And there was one period a few years ago where like I looked my absolute worst. Like, I was maybe like almost 50 pounds more than I was now, and my eye was all fucked up, and people called me beautiful more often than I have ever heard in my life. And I was like, that's clearly to make me feel better, and it's clearly false. And I thought to myself, I don't trust a single one of you anymore at all. Like, you didn't have to say any of that. I didn't ask, and you just said it anyway. And I'm like, it made me mad.
I totally get that. Rohan, were you about to jump in?
Well, yeah, I was going to say I was a full adult by the time I learned what a cuticle was. I was like, you guys, like, I don't think I ever used that word in my life until I was like, I already had a full 4 years of college and graduated and everything. Yeah, I mean, jumping into your point about masculinity, Anu, I have a post sitting in my drafts called Masculinity Will Always Be Threatening to Women. And the point is that, with this whole like Pedro Pascal type masculinity, and like, there's this watered down version of like masculinity where it wants all the benefits but kind of plays it safe.
Yeah.
And one of the attributes that will always be a part of masculinity, to whatever extent masculinity is a concrete thing, it's this ambition and it's this drive to make yourself more powerful.
Yeah.
Right? You will want to make yourself more powerful, and
How dare you?
the you can use, like, I mean, I see it like a muscle, right? You train a muscle, it gets bigger and stronger. You can use your muscles to strangle someone, or you can use it to protect that same person, right? So masculinity is the same thing. Like, you will strive to attain power, and you can use that power to protect people. You can use that power to hurt people, right? And so there's always going to be that element of threateningness to it, because like power itself is a threatening thing. Right.
Yeah.
And so, it kind of got me started because I was watching this podcast. There's this guy called Ned Fulmer. It's like this corner of the internet that I never go to. Right. He's this dude cheated on his wife and then made her come onto his podcast to talk about it. And it is the most painful conversation that I've ever seen. This poor woman has to sit there and like make it seem like they're going through it together, right? And in this case it's the guy, but the guy's using therapy speak to make it seem like they both were traumatized or something. It would be like if like a Jewish person and like a Nazi like sat down together, did a podcast, and talked about how they were both part of a traumatic event. And you're like, this is a completely different like situation here, right? For between the man and the woman. And the point I was trying to make there is that there's like a group of like, I don't know, millennial Reddit type guy who's like very meek and like, just doesn't try to appear threatening at all. And it's like, that's not the same as like having any sort of virtue, right? It's like saying, I'm going to try and make myself less threatening to women. So I'm not going to work out. I'm going to get super fat. I'm going to make my muscles shrivel up. So therefore women will see me as threatening. So therefore they'll like me more. Like,
do they do that on purpose though? Is that a conscious thing?
That's a good question. I think that, see, again, this is where I do a little bit of like ancient problem style psychoanalysis. I think a lot of them, they find that it's very difficult to be like the captain of the football sort of archetype, right? And so like everyone's kind of looking for status in their own way. And so what ends up happening is that they realize they can't be the guy who's on the field that the cheerleaders love. So they end up kind of going in the opposite direction, where they go like, I'm going to make myself kind of like a lover boy type, very doughy, very like non-threatening, so that I can kind of be like soft and sort of feminine with the women. But the problem is that that's not like that has no
Not what we really
correlation
want.
to your character,
Correct.
right? Like, again, the point I was trying to make in the article is like a lot of these people who like kind of come across as like these lover boy feminist types, they're the ones like sending dick pics to minors, right? They're the ones who like have no fucking like honor or intention, right? So just because you come across that way doesn't mean you've developed any sort of masculinity and sort of, and this is something that probably Lirpa, because it seems like you work in sort of a gym environment. But like when you go into the gym, like who are some of the kindest, friendliest people? It's like the guy who's like fucking jacked and like worked out for 20 years, right? He's willing to like show you the machines and kind of show you how everything kind of works, right? It's because like that guy understands more than anybody what it's like to struggle. And it's like, I think the captain of a football team archetype is like been maligned, because it's like, yeah, sure, he's the captain of his football team, but that dude knows what it's like to run into another man full speed and just get his bell rung like a whole bunch of time. Like that guy's been humbled more than the nerd ever has.
Yeah.
And so like I think a lot of times like a lot of like guys are confused because they choose like the asshole like type of archetype over them. But it's like a lot of women would like to date the nerd, but they're more afraid of the nerd because they've never been like vibe checked in their life. They've never been fucking had to go on a field and like play in a high stakes situation. I see this a lot in like sort of the academic environment. It's a very catty environment. It's a very like people who pretend like they're just in it for the pursuit of knowledge, but at the same time they want to get published. They want to have their ideas out there. I mean, quite frankly, I see it a lot in in the Substack, sort of circle where it's a lot of people who want to make their name in like the quote unquote battleground of ideas. And I'm like, guys, this is bullshit. Like we just go on the internet, we read some stuff and then we post it. And it's like, it's not that big of a deal. Right. So anyways, like that was kind of my main point, that there's an element of masculinity that will never be safe. Like it'll never be like this
No, you can't have it both.
patriarchal protect the dolls type shit.
You can't have it both ways is what I'm hearing basically, is like, if you want, as a woman, if you find, that attractive, then you're going to have to, actually there's a lot of preference falsification here. So I know we all, you and I, at least, Rohan, are ambivalent about Scott Galloway. I was watching him on the Modern Wisdom podcast, and he was talking about how, like, a lot of men have taken the cue to be non-threatening to women, but the men that women are actually complaining about are going to continuously still do that behavior. They're not the ones changing. It's the like slightly lower echelon and below who are taking this feminism, like, desire for safer men to heart, and women don't find it attractive. So then women apparently tell Scott Galloway that they whisper in his ear that they want like a masculine man, instead of just being honest, because women punish them for fucking being honest. And I married a nerd. It didn't work. It just didn't. I married a safe, feminist coded nerd. That, and another thing is, actually, Lurpa, I'll turn it back to you, but I have noticed though that men who are able to hold strength and power, whether it be physical, mental, whatever, like that's like attractive in a person just in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my to-be husband does boxing and various martial arts. So he sees it as, the point is not to be aggressive. It is to have enough strength to de-escalate and like be reliable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And yeah, my first husband was also, he also called himself a feminist. And I remember the first few weeks we were dating, he got me that book called Cunt. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's just a feminist manifesto about vaginas. I don't know. But so I was like, this is so sweet. And then literally like a week later, he said something about how I wasn't really his type. I think, God, I wasn't even like chubby or anything, but he like made it sound like I was. And I don't know, I was like, this is so ironic considering the book you just gave me about like accepting my body and whatnot. And it's very ironic because it goes right into that whole stereotype of like the hyper feminist man actually being kind of a dick. And he especially about gender. I mean, he had a lot of mommy issues,
Well, it's funny. Like, so I have a post that I deleted, actually. I ended up parsing it off to some other stuff. But like, I originally had a post called "I am the only true feminist" on this website. And basically, the point that I was trying to make there is that, as much as like, because I'm pretty directly confrontational whenever I'm replying to certain feminist rhetoric. And, I like to make fun of certain posts that come across as silly. But it's like, I at least take the ideas seriously, even if I'm like kind of clowning on it. And, people, they have their comment, I get called like an incel or a dumbass, whatever, it's fine. But what ends up like whenever I see you, like Anuradha specifically, probably you as well, Lurpa, but like it's almost like whenever you have these opinions, a lot of women and even men too, they kind of like baby you. They tell you that you're too stupid to have these opinions, which is like it's the craziest thing because it's like this inversion. So as much as I talk about like, I'm kind of like branded as like this anti-feminist guy, I don't do that to people, right? So it's like I'm treating you better than the supposed feminists ever are. Right? It's like
absolutely
more confrontational, right?
They see you as a gender traitor. They call you a pick-me. I mean, it's all sorts of things. I got just like ran out of the feminist blogosphere back in the early 2010s. Like I was talking about early on in the conversation. Like I started with a feminist blog that ended up being like, well, not a feminist blog anymore because I critiqued them too much and I argued against their ideas too much and they didn't like me as a result. So I still stayed in that circle because I liked to promote my things there because I knew it would get a lot of engagement, but I got more engagement from the anti-feminist men.
Yep.
And it was positive engagement.
Yeah.
And they still considered me a feminist, but the feminists did not, you know?
Fascinating.
Yeah.
They
Isn't it? And,
feminists, but the actual feminists didn't. That is
right.
funny. You know, I have a ideologically varied audience, as I imagine both of you do.
Oh, yeah.
Also, though
All over
actually,
the place.
I don't have really far leftists because they just can't tolerate it. Like a lot of them,
I've gotten blocked by a bunch of them.
yeah, exactly. But other than that, like I have a variety of heterodox type liberals and like conservatives, like people who voted for Trump. And I don't, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me what their ideological leanings are. The question is like, can they see through the bullshit to see what's actually happening under these social structures that people are just taking for granted? And people do infantilize me. Women especially infantilize you and me, Lorpa. Like all the fucking time. And I think this is because feminism is a closed epistemic system. This is something I've been trying to develop a little bit. Curious what you guys think, but because the feminist bent begins from this unfalsifiable position, which is that women are oppressed and men are the oppressors, and women should get more power, even as feminists distrust power as somehow evil. It's still a power acquisition strategy that they won't admit is a power acquisition strategy through epistemic closure. And when I say epistemic closure, I mean that because it begins from this unfalsifiable position, you can't actually debate any of it to falsify it because it resists the very structure of logic and debate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, there was this, I started to write a note about it. I thought I deleted it. I thought maybe I would just expand this into a larger post, because I think I remember for a long time back when they were called SJWs instead of the woke or whatever, you know, back when Trump was first running, 2015, 2016. And a lot of people, like, the woke language was just starting to kind of become more mainstream, but not mainstream enough that your average normie would understand it. They would be like, oh, this black guy's being racist towards me, a white guy. And then someone would be like, oh, black people can't be racist, you know, like that sort of thing. Cause they'd be operating off of the privilege plus power or prejudice plus power, or whatever that thing is. And, you know, I'd have my real life friends saying, this is ridiculous, I want to argue. And my husband would do this too, because he was not as knee deep in this whole online environment as I've been for so long. And I'd say, look, don't say that to her. This is exactly what she's going to say in response. You need to argue like along their same logical framework. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. And I spent so much time just trying to get people to understand how to talk to these people, how to speak their language, because it's so like their internal logic is tight. And if you go anywhere outside of it, you're just excluded, period.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized is that there's actually not very many ways to do that, because like you said, it's very epistemically closed off. And anything that you try to introduce that doesn't fall along their very specific parameters is going to be dismissed immediately. And, you know, this is done way too much, but I mean, it's very 1984-ish in the newspeak sort of way. You know, if you change the language, change the language enough that you can't question certain things. You can't argue against certain things because you simply don't have the language for it within the framework that you're trying to discuss it.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really bigotry if you're bigoted towards everyone. I mean, you're treating everyone equally. Like, it's you're just making jokes. I think that's the most difficult part, right? Like, I'm not like this is the thing that I think I've told this story, so I apologize if people have heard of it before. But like, I remember attending this seminar of like this person talking about like networking. And she was saying like, oh, you know, when you're trying to make friends, you should spend 33% of your time with people who are doing better than you in life, 33% of your time with people who are doing the same, and then 33% of your time with people who are doing worse than you. I'm like, this is the terrible idea, right? Because I'm like, I don't look at my friendships this way. I don't talk like, I'm not like, oh, okay, you know, I hung out with Dave twice this month, but he doesn't make as much money as I do, so I need to push him over to the next fiscal quarter or whatever, right? And so I think it's this idea that, you know, you're finely tuning your sensibilities along these categories, right? I don't care. Like it would be the dumbest way to kind of look at people. And this is the problem where I think a lot of these identitarian politics actually ends up backfiring, because it's like, I look at someone and you're like, oh, okay, this is a person who's like a brown woman with a disability, so I need to start giving her higher priority whenever she speaks or whatever. It's like, no, it's just people. Again, I recognize that people have different backgrounds, but I think it's not a good idea to constantly have that as like your fundamental operating system, right? Like this critical theory, oppressor, oppressed, right?
Yeah.
I think the analogy I gave was like, if you're kind of going into like a department store, like you work at the paint section, the first day you work there, like, you won't be able to tell like off-white from like cream from like, whatever, some other color. But it's like eventually you start being able to fine tune, like even without those little paint cards, right? Because it's like you just get attuned to seeing the different colors after like several months. And so like I think it's the same thing with this critical theory. Like if you drill your head with like these identitarian categories, you're only going to see people in terms of like, oh, okay, right now I'm on a podcast with a white woman and a brown woman, so I need to like, okay, Anu, you're going to get 45% of the discussion, and then I'll get the next 25, and then Lirpa, you can get whatever's left over. It's like, it's the dumbest way to kind of think about things, right? Coming back to your point, Anu, about like the whole Prof G Scott Galloway thing, and it's like one of the things that infuriates me is that he always talks about how men have like a 500-year head start, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not 500 years old. Like,
Right.
I didn't buy a house
Yes.
200 years ago. And it's
Present men. They always talk about past people as though present people have an advantage from past people. What the fuck?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just like one of these talking points. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Lirpa.
Oh, no, it's okay. I wanted to talk about one of your points, because like you were talking about how, when you break up your friends or who you hang out with into those three categories or whatever, better, worse, and the same as you, and how that ends up making you start to see these differences way too quickly. I remember back when I started my whole like critical theory journey or whatever in the late aughts, and I was learning about, the whole prejudice plus privilege, intersectionality, all of that good stuff. My social circle at the time, like, my school life was very racially diverse, but in Minneapolis, it's a pretty segregated area. And like, I think a lot of northern cities are. And so as you become an adult, as a white person, you don't have, I mean, at least I'm very much generalizing. So if you're an exception, I believe you, don't worry about it. But like, in my experience, if you're like a white person, especially as a millennial in my life, you end up, your social circles just kind of homogenized. Like most of my friends became white after high school. And so I started learning about all of these things, especially in particular about racism. And it got to the point where like I didn't hang out with enough Black people, to like ground myself. and like I read all this stuff, and it made me like, I had a couple of Black coworkers who I swear to God I had no fucking idea how to talk to them, because I was so like, I don't want to say poisoned, but I feel like that CRT stuff poisoned me, because it made me see them as like not normal people like myself, but as special, unique, like both highly oppressed but highly powerful people at the same time. And so I was terrified of saying the wrong thing, like to a Black woman I worked with. I would talk like the way that they make fun of white people who are uncomfortable around Black people in sitcoms. That's like who I became for a while, and it was very embarrassing. And and it's kind of funny looking back, because I moved to Virginia, which is much more naturally integrated, just being in the South, and the demographics are different. It's very different here. Virginia, literally, I don't like Virginia, but it cured me of that really embarrassing white lady thing, that CRT gave me. Like, it really did make me separate all these people way too much. It was not helpful for interpersonal relationships. It wasn't helpful for anything. I couldn't work with people properly. Like, just putting that in my head, it made me almost dehumanize people who weren't white.
Yes. The whole bodies thing, Black bodies. What the fuck is that about?
I hate that so much.
It's so cringy.
It's gross. Like, it grosses me out to hear it.
I was indoctrinated too, like you were, by CRT. So I my education was basically I was in multiple departments. I managed to make some kind of interdisciplinary education for myself. And yet in the departments of religion, history, English, African studies, fucking Latin American studies, all of these departments had a critical theory strain going through them.
And when they pretend it doesn't really exist.
Yes. It's invisible. It becomes invisible because it's everywhere, right?
It is. And they say, no, this is just a high-level law class that you might take if you're in a specific major. No, that's not how it is. CRT and critical theory in general is being taught to all of the administrators, all of the teachers. Maybe you're not setting your third grader down and talking about the inequities of housing law from the 70s, but you're still imbuing them with all of the critical theory that you've been taught that you want to disseminate across the newer generations. It's very obvious it is real, and it made me so angry. It's literal gaslighting to pretend that this isn't happening.
And actually that brings me to education real quick, if we could just touch on that. As you say, it has made its way to the next generation. So I did Teach for America right out of grad school because I graduated from grad school in 2011. Obviously no one's getting any jobs. And I was really conscious of the fact that I was being brainwashed in the TFA training. I was being brainwashed into a particular professional managerial class view of poor people. And the fact, like the whole growth mindset thing, like, oh, well, you can just overcome the disadvantages of poverty if you hold them to high standards and if you force them to behave in the classroom, if you have good classroom management. Not understanding, of course, that poverty is a pretty totalizing condition that affects everything, how you behave, what you achieve, your just level of IQ. I mean, it does lower people's IQs, right? Because they don't get like their parents don't talk to them as much. So they know fewer words before they start school. And so there was this, like women with fancy bags teaching poor kids. And it was such a paternalistic neo-colonial thing. But and they probably studied these concepts, but they don't understand how they are being neo-colonizers and paternalistic toward the subaltern audience or the subaltern population of this country. It was like. Anyway, okay, let's go to some comments. I'm sure that they've been like probably. One of the funniest things about the feminization discourse is that every center-left person hates the changes Andrews wrote about. But because she connects those things to sex differences, gender norms, they start pulling their chins and shooting squid ink. That is a great point, because I've also written a lot about this, is that the denial of sex differences is actually the bedrock of the professional managerial class project. It is the bedrock of their moral authority. It is the foundation of feminization, the pretense that men and women are exactly the same and are interchangeable. That denial, and then, of course, it's the bedrock of gender ideology. So all these things go together, and they're predicated, I think, upon the denial of sex differences. And with that, the denial of the fact that there are more men at the extremes of IQ than there are women. So there are more men who are smarter than most women and more men who are dumber than most women, is how I would explain. And the James Damore thing, which I was at Google a few years prior to that, and I was in the HR context. So I saw a lot of what he was saying happen. And I was hiring privileged Indian women and privileged white women under the guise of diversity, right? It was the first diversity recruiting team that I was on. And those two privileged sets of people were getting hired under affirmative action. Those are the people who are least in need of affirmative action.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. I don't know. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just like the whole idea of, Harvard taking in, say, Nigerian immigrants who are highly educated already and very wealthy, and then considering it a diversity, admission because they're Black, which, I mean, they're incredibly privileged. They probably could have gotten into any college they wanted, but they're brought in under the guise of diversity, even though they don't consider class to be it.
No,
they don't consider it part of diversity at all.
And what's weird is, like, when you bring that up, when you in this conversation about affirmative action, when you bring up the fact that Black immigrants from Africa who came recently have a far higher educational advantage and parental advantage than American Black people who end up not getting into these colleges, right, under affirmative action. When you bring that up, like, they just don't address it as though it's like a material thing to care about. And that's, of course, because they care more about the symbolic than the material.
Yeah, exactly. The symbolism of simply the skin color rather than the entire background of the person and whether or not they might deserve this opportunity or not, or at least in that particular fashion.
Yep. There's someone said among center-left writers and especially commenters, you hear the term econ-brained. It means dwelling on things that are good but emotionally unappealing. Econ-brained. Rohan, are you an econ-brain?
I hope not. That sounds terrible.
He makes fun of economists all the time.
I mean, I talk about these economists, and this is the thing. I mean, this is sort of an oversimplification of how I think about a lot of these econ guru guys. But it's like, if you're a grown man and you've never done 3 consecutive pull-ups, I don't care what your opinions are on like anything, right? And it's like, it's because we just have fundamentally different values of like how we think society should be run. And obviously it's a little bit hyperbolic, but it's like, I think with a lot of these econ guys, they were guys that, they weren't good enough to get into math or whatever. And so they wanted to get something that's technical sounding. But, if we're being honest, a lot of economics is part of the humanities. It's more closer to like the literature than it is to anything else. But then
Behavior.
it's this perfect amalgamation of many of the things that we were talking about, where it's like, they use a lot of fancy sounding words. They use a lot of like things that make it seem like they're doing something that's like scientific. But in reality, it's just punditry. They're just giving their opinion on how things should be run. And it's weird because like you should know this, like just logically deducing it, because you see these guys, they give their opinions on like domestic labor issues, and then they talk about like Japanese markets, and then they'll talk about like how the India-Pakistan conflict is going to like disrupt supply chains. And in the back of your mind, you have to know like these guys can't be knowledgeable on all of these things,
No way.
right? So really, they're just pundits, and then they use the language of economics to kind of justify the things that they're saying. But yeah, more generally, it's like, dude, just learn how to do pull-ups, man. Like you got to do like, this is the thing. Like a lot of these people who have these opinions, it's like they don't have the same fundamental values that I do, right? Again, I'm being facetious, but it's like it's there's a starting point that I see with a lot of these guys that, it's clearly that they value a certain set of things that I don't value, right? I'm happy to sacrifice a little bit of GDP if it means that our rivers aren't like shit brown and we can like see the sky and like, there's not a whole bunch of pollution and cows aren't getting slaughtered, right? To them, they see everything in terms of like these aggregate metrics. I wrote a post a little while ago talking about how many of the metrics they still use to this day are just like these outdated metrics that don't really kind of give a good picture of the economy. Now, I think it's changing, like, because I think even like these guys are starting to point out, it's like, hey, isn't it weird that out of the top 500 American companies, the vast majority of values is like to the top 7? Like that seems wrong, but it's like this is a trend that's been going on, depending on how you look at it, for like 2 decades now. Of course, this is happening, right?
They're all advertising companies. That's the other fucked up part. Is another aspect of feminization actually that reminded me of is we're surrounded by marketing. We're surrounded by the desire generation industry. And we just we've stopped noticing because it's just everywhere. And you have to try really hard to not be exposed to it constantly. So when I'm talking about ontological feminization, actually, the desire generation that surrounds us constantly, desire is a feminine thing. It is an ontologically feminine thing, right? And that's okay. That doesn't make it bad. It's when it takes everything over that it's bad. And this is going back to the Bhagavad Gita, actually, to bring it back to way earlier in the conversation, is that teaches you to not be beholden to your desires. And I believe that there's a verse that where Krishna advises Arjun to not let himself get carried away with the rapids of emotions, just be carried away in water like that, because your emotions and your desires are just going to carry you away if you don't actually try to control them. The book that I mentioned, by the way, so I mentioned Dagny. It was Amusing Ourselves to Death. Everyone who is watching, really needs to read that book. That has like high explanatory power for the current moment. And then also, 1984 is great, but Brave New World, I think, is more explanatory of our society, actually. Let's see, what else did people say? The affluent society. Yes, thank you. Someone else said that. I hadn't scrolled far. Move my camera down. Okay, Chris. Did I move it down far enough? Lily says, oh, Lily. Lily is an actual friend, who who said she had to unsubscribe to Rohan because he posts too much. That's fucking hilarious.
What can I say? I'm prolific.
And that's why you came. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're here. Actually, Natalie, I was thinking that you and I should talk. We'll make it happen at some point, I hope. I think it stands to reason, Georgie Borman says, that lower IQ women are harder on feminine, infantilizing language as they're seeking equalization. Yes, they are. Thank you for stating that so well. They're seeking equalization for other women to be kind to them and raise them up. I am unwilling to do that. And Lurpa, I imagine you are also unwilling to do that, which makes us unwelcome in these spaces because you can tell who's not smart in that female only space, right? And as soon as you act as though there is a hierarchy of intelligence, you become the problem. And this has happened multiple times, and I've gotten kicked out of groups because of it. Has that happened to you, Lurpa?
Yeah, I'd say probably not in the workplace, more so in social settings.
Yeah. That's happened to me. I've never understood pick me as an insult. Who is here trying not to get picked? Oh, this is a way of dampening status competition among women. So if women see that another woman is acting in such a way that somehow gets her more male attention, whether she's trying to get it or not, this is the crucial thing. Yeah. Whether she is trying to get male attention or not, she is susceptible to the pick-me accusation because Rob Henderson actually made a great point about this. I think it's that, or he said that it's that they would have to work harder to get the same attention and they just don't want to work harder. And you know what I've also noticed is that for all the asshole men who infantilize me on Substack, there are a lot of men who engage with me as an equal, like many. Like I don't want to represent the ones who are assholes as like somehow the majority. There are many thoughtful men in my audience who engage with me deeply, and I really appreciate that you don't treat me, you don't infantilize me. Like I appreciate that. But the mere fact of that happening, that is what gets me pick me accusations, right? When men engage with you as an equal, it is seen as giving you attention, whether it is romantic or not. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's
something
exactly
that I find interesting. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, yeah, that's exactly what's happened to me in the past is that like you aren't trying to cater to any man's opinion, but because men agree with you in a respectful manner, they feel threatened, and so they call you a pick-me, and they just assume or accuse you of trying to pander to them or just trying to keep their attention, almost like an audience capture thing, I guess. But yeah, I just commiserating about that. It's definitely a thing that happens quite a bit.
What's weird is that like in the gym, like what I find interesting is that, you know, if you go and you say that you want to work out, you want to drop some body fat, put on some muscle specifically so that you want to look more attractive to women, it's like no guy's going to be like, "Oh, why are you doing like you should do it for yourself," right? But weirdly in the opposite direction, like women have to do this thing where it's like, "Oh, no, I'm just doing it for myself. Like I just want to be healthy." Like there's almost this like refusal to admit that I'm going to change something about myself, especially physical, to make myself more attractive to the opposite sex. I mean, that's
you're not supposed to admit that because it's supposed to be a betrayal, or it means that you're centering your life around men instead of yourself. But I mean, I have this theory that we don't do a single thing for ourselves when it comes to appearance. I mean, even if it's not romantic, you know, even if we're not trying to, you know, attract somebody. I mean, I still think about what are the people at Walmart going to think of me when I go grocery shopping, you know? So, I mean, I'm still going to, you know, do something to myself. And it's all going to be based, no matter how unconsciously, on whatever the beauty norms are, whatever, you know, maybe it is based on what I think that men find attractive, even if I'm, you know, a married woman going to the grocery store alone and not trying to attract a man. In my head, I'm still going to be thinking, this is how I want to look. Even if I'm at home alone putting on makeup, I'm still, you know, going to be basing whatever I'm doing on whatever's been conditioned into me to think is attractive, right? I don't think that's bad necessarily. I just think that it's, to be honest,
admit it.
Yeah, exactly. Just admit it. It's fine. I think
Rohan, I think you wrote about this too, and I've been thinking about it also. Who do women dress for? I think women dress primarily for other women's scrutiny, not even for men. I think makeup is fine, and it can do good things for people's features and whatnot. I mean, I don't really enjoy wearing it because it feels just like trying hard, and I don't like trying hard. It feels like a sort of a protest for me to not try hard, if that makes sense. And I feel like that there was you had written about the gym like outfits, or was that you? That maybe that was someone else. I can't remember who it was. But there was a controversy a while back about, or maybe it's ongoing, about how women who dress really revealingly at the gym then complaining about men staring at them.
and they
But
hardly ever work out when they wear those clothes. They're usually just wandering around,
yes,
sometimes wandering on a treadmill for no reason. It's very silly. But anyway.
Yeah, I was curious to get both of your perspectives on this, and it's somewhat tangential, but it's like sometimes I read an article from like women's like dating advice on the on Substack, and I'm like, this has to be sabotage, right? Like it seems to be women sabotaging other women because it's like I read this and I'm like, if you follow this advice, you are going to be alone. Right? I think one of the more recent trends is like I stumbled across this article from EV magazine. I'm sure it's other places, but it's like just having a boyfriend is embarrassing now. And I'm like,
yes,
this is fantastic. I'm like, this is the greatest article I've ever read. I'm like, this has to be sabotage, right? It has
yeah.
to be people sabotaging. And it's the same thing that you were mentioning, Lirpa. Like you were getting the most compliments when you looked like you said you had like a fucked up eye or whatever, and you're like,
Yeah.
you know,
I looked like deformed, and these people were like, "You're so beautiful." I'm like, "Fuck
yeah,
you."
exactly. And it's like, I don't know. I sometimes I feel bad because it's like I feel that, you know, with guys at least, like it's like they'll tell you you look like shit, but it's like, okay, now we know where we stand where we with
Yeah.
each other. It's like it's not that complicated. We're not thinking about it. And to your point, Anu, it's like, yeah, I probably wouldn't notice if someone was wearing like a dress like, you know, 2 3 days in a row. Like
Nope.
you don't notice those things, like or at least I don't, right? Like maybe I'm not
Men
typical,
don't notice shit.
Men
I mean,
don't
yeah,
notice. Yeah.
you guys don't notice things, and it's fine. I don't expect it. I don't expect you to know where things are in the house. I don't expect, like, there are a lot of things I just don't expect that I used to, because I recognize that they are just not men's strong suits. So
Yeah.
so I'm sorry. And the thing you were asking about though, the boyfriend thing. Oh, okay. So Rob Henderson also wrote about this, and I thought it was like smart. I don't, and he also noted that the women who are saying that it's embarrassing to have a boyfriend themselves have boyfriends. And the reason that they find it embarrassing to post about it is because if a breakup happens, then they're embarrassed. And it does seem like sabotage. Like, saying that it's embarrassing to have a boyfriend seems like sabotage for women who actually want to settle down and have kids, which is, again, feminism I see as a competitive sabotage system that papers over women's covert competition, which is, again, evolutionarily based. I think feminism is an adaptive mechanism for women's covert competition to continue in the modern world. What do you guys think about that?
It sounds like a plausible theory, honestly. Although it makes me wonder what benefits there might be to it, as opposed
Yeah.
to, because we saw like unchecked masculinity running everything for a while. Now we see unchecked femininity running
Yeah.
things for a little while. And we can recognize the masculine virtues, right? But what are the good things that feminization has brought to any of these institutions? Can we think of anything?
I guess, like, so here's the thing. You'd think that sexual harassment would be one of those, but I don't think it is. I don't think that's actually true. I think there are still men who are willing to push the boundaries in a plausibly deniable way. And I say that because it's happened to me multiple times, where men will perform. This particular man performed feminism and, like, was trying to increase my visibility, but was doing it, I later realized, for the wrong reasons. And he was trying to trying to make something happen, but in the most deniable way possible. He towed the line, kind of, but like not really, because he was finding reasons to get in my personal space. And he did it like multiple times on a client trip. And I didn't complain about it because I knew that one, I would have a hard time proving it. And two, he was well liked by leadership, and I was new, so I didn't want to rock the boat. And I think that was still the right decision, but I guess my point is feminization has just pushed a lot of these things underground. It has also pushed, I think, female desire underground, where desire still exists, but it is pathologized. So women just kind of suppress it and are not able to express it in a healthy manner.
Yeah, I would agree with
Yeah, for
that.
sure. I worked at a startup, like about over a decade ago, and it was an all guy environment, right? So like this idea that, women are going to come in and sort of ruin everything. I don't think that's true, right? Because you kind of, if, an all female environment, it like kind of turns into a longhouse, then, a lot of this stuff like that, was at our work was kind of like a more frat house environment. It was a lot of like work hard, play hard type shit. And I'm like, and it's funny because overall I feel like, the way that I personally treat work is more feminine coded. Like I don't really someone said it right. Like I clock in at 9, I clock out at 5. Like I'm not gonna gun for the promotion. I was offered a promotion a couple of years ago, and I just turned it down, right? Because I don't want to deal with people. Like that's more meetings, more people that I have to talk to. I'm like, I don't need the extra salary at the time. It's like why would I do that, right? I like the yeah, I'm like I like the IC role that I have, and I like the lifestyle that I have. So it's funny because dispositionally, that's very feminine. I would say, like based on this conversation, but there's definitely like you need like at least in some environments like some woman to show up and kind of like I don't know what to call it, like put guys in check or like having a woman around like makes guys more disciplined, right? Otherwise, like you turn into slobs. It's fucking yeah, yeah, and it's like just having them there, but I think like where it gets like unchecked is just this idea that because again, I'm speaking from my own personal anecdotes. We just speak off the cuff. Sometimes there's a lot of shit that we say, and it's like it's stupid, it's insensitive, and like very often, if you just let it marinate for like 2 or 3 days, we're like, yeah, that was kind of stupid. I don't know why I said it like that, right? But if you're gonna jump on that guy and then all of a sudden call him like the next Adolf Hitler because he said something it's going to create this backlash, right? And again, like tying it back to the politics, right? It's the thing that I see, and again, I admit that I have like an algorithmic bias in terms of the content that I see, but it's always people shifting like the way that you guys shifted, right? You guys were very feminist, very like lefty, very woke, and then you get caught in this labyrinth of social rules, and you're like, no matter what I do, I'm going to activate some sort of weird tripwire that I don't even really understand. It's going to come as a consequence to me. And after a while, you're just like, fuck it. I'm just going to say what I'm going to say. Like, if it's a lose-lose, I'm going to lose the way that I want to lose, right? And so I think a lot of guys in general have that same sort of instinct. I see a few comments here. Let's check them out.
Oof. Okay. So works. Okay. So I'm going to make a thought. Oh, okay. Okay. Main point is that it's not all bad and the field was hijacked. Okay. I mean, but I don't agree, but okay. Actually, no. You know what? I will grant. Let me pause on that for a second. So I have been rereading Foucault and Derrida, and actually picked up Judith Butler the other day. Holy shit, she has some word salad. I had read Gender Trouble a long time ago, like the first, I don't know, whatever, the first chapter of it, which is like half the book, and I had a hard time understanding it then. Now, oh man, because of all the reading I've done, it is very fucking clear the illogic of her position. Now, I do think, though, Foucault actually applies to analyzing feminization. I've actually compared or brought the panopticon into, like, I've used the panopticon to explain how women police each other, and then that policing of each other turns into self-policing. So there is no authenticity in women's society because of all the policing that happens. So women like me and Lurpa can't actually be ourselves because we get policed. And that is straight out of Foucault. And then separately, feminist philosophers applied Foucault to the patriarchy to say, oh, well, there are all these like patriarchal male privileging structures that erase women. And I am now using Foucault to argue the opposite. So I think Foucault does also have actually explanatory power. So you know what? I take it back. I agree with you. But I think critical theory needs to be used against the left. And so that's something I'm trying to do. We had a guy for a short time in an all-female department. He chilled everything out, and we were more. It's funny. I actually also I don't know if you guys have noticed this. So I've worked on all male and all female project teams. On the all female project team, there's just like always this ambient anxiety and emotion that's just always there. Like I don't know what the anxiety is about because often there's not really anything to be anxious about, and when there is, everyone freaks out. And then all male project teams, even if the project is fucked, everyone's just laughing about it and making jokes. So it's hard to be anxious about it. And frankly, I prefer working with that. Why would you want to be in an environment of neuroticism and ambient anxiety? I just don't want that.
So can I jump in for a second?
Please.
That is a learned skill. I can tell you that it's very much like you have to, because for a lot of guys, it's not natural to kind of like kind of just be stoic about it, laugh it off. Like we have the same energy,
Okay.
like, when we're kids, all that stuff. We got the same anxiety, right? And all that stuff. But what we realized very early on, especially, when we're working with women, if we start having that like jumpy, like, energy of like, freaking out, then that's going to permeate onto other people, right? Like you can't do that, right? Because it's going to affect other people. And I think this is something that a lot of women don't really understand when they ask like, oh, how come guys don't open up? How come they don't vent? How come they don't? It's like, because we're trained to not put that on other people. It comes across as differently. So, I mean, this is a stupid analogy, but here's the way that I kind of see it in terms of like the different emotionalities. It's like, you have the spray bottle, like a Febreze or something. Like women, I feel like whenever they're talking to people, it's kind of on like mist mode, where the emotions are more like diffuse. You'll talk to different people. You'll talk to, guys. I don't know. We're stuck on like the American Sniper fucking jet mode, where like you spray and it's like that single stream. I don't know. Our emotions just kind of come out the same way. It's a lot more intense, but it's a lot more like, brief.
Yes.
So I think like a lot of times, when they ask like, how come you don't open up like that? It's like, it's because it's going to come out on jet mode. You're expecting like a nice cool mist to kind of like cool you off on a summer's day. It's like, no, you're going to get shot in the face with like a stream of water. Right. So I think a lot of times like the way that it comes out is different, and we are aware of that effect. Like we are made to be aware of that effect that we have on people, because if you're in a group of people and the guy starts freaking out, then everybody's going to start freaking out.
Yeah,
right? So
because we look at men like they're supposed to be like the stabilizing figure, even if we don't want to look at them like that.
Yeah. It's automatic.
Yeah, and I think, my husband told me a story once about his ex-girlfriend, and he had lived here in Virginia. We met in Minnesota, but he lived here before he met me for a while. And he ended up moving this girl that he had known for a long time down to Virginia, and they were dating. And on their way, they ended up buying like a used van to move her stuff because it was cheaper than renting one. And anyway, somewhere in a scary part of the mountains, they broke down, and she was panicking and freaking out and yelling, and he was extremely calm. And she had accused him of not caring or not wanting to do anything about it because he wasn't freaking out to her level. And he said, I am not freaking out because someone has to not freak out. Like if I do, then you do even more, and then we don't fix anything. And I think about that so often because it really is like it is important to have one person be the calm one to kind of ground everybody else. And, for better or worse, we all kind of expect that of the men.
Yes.
So when they come down to our level, in a sense, and I'm not even trying to pathologize women reacting more strongly. I mean, if it's what comes naturally to us, I'm trying to embrace these things a little more, just in a more integrated way. But so I'm not even trying to say that that's bad, but the necessity of having one person be the calm, chill one, it makes sense. And that is a burden placed on men, but it's one that I've come to accept as kind of necessary. And with that comes like, I have to, accept that there's not going to be a lot of emotional conversations like the type that I might have with another woman or with a man who's more feminized in a sense, or more in touch with his feminine side, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to talk to a man about emotional things. I just don't. I don't get I don't get debate partners in women, so I would rather just talk about ideas with men, right? And then the most feminist of women will say, actually, to your point, that I want a man to like hold my chaos or some such thing. That is a highly feminized, like that means their internal orientation is highly feminine to the point where there is chaos inside that they want a man to help them handle. Why are we depending on men to handle our internal chaos? We need to have some fucking discipline. Like, we just don't. It goes back to the infantilization thing. And perhaps, okay, so to close on this, because I have an appointment, otherwise I would actually keep going. But and there are like 165 people here. Damn, I'm
That's
like,
pretty awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it. Isabel, I want to address your question, but I don't want to address it like here. So if you want to message me, we can talk about it. To wrap it up, I think perhaps we have landed on feminization, or feminine qualities are not bad. They're not bad. They shouldn't be suppressed, right? So like emotion, aesthetics, like all these things have a place in life. They bring beauty to life, right? Beauty is a feminine thing like it's just ontologically feminine. I'm talking about ontology. I'm not talking about people.
Right.
And these things need to be in balance, and they're completely out of balance in both women, especially out of balance. And there's many men in whom it's also out of balance, right? Like they have zero touch with their emotions, or just, I don't know, in general, like they're not able to connect with people as they would like. And I think a lot of men struggle
It's on
with
a
that.
time delay. I would put it like that. It's
Yeah.
sometimes we're like, oh, okay, I really was annoyed 2 days ago. It just takes a while for us.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's actually, no, I actually hadn't thought about that.
Yeah,
I have that problem a lot in, when I'm in my relationships. Like they would be like, why were you so cold? It's like, I didn't know I was annoyed. Now I know. My bad. Right. And so like in one of the other relationships, she kind of figured that out. She's like, okay, go work out, take a nap, and then we'll talk. Right. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I was kind of upset in that situation. My bad on that.
What do you guys think feminization is? To go back to that point as a wrapping up, only because I have to run, and I'm sorry.
Right. What was your question again?
Oh no, just like what is your final take on feminization in terms of what it is?
Well, okay, my take on what it is, I really liked the way that you said, like, taking interpersonal feminine communication norms and just kind of extrapolating them to the workplace. Like, there's nothing wrong with it necessarily in a social setting. If you all speak the language and you agree to it and whatever, it can run smoothly enough, I guess. But yeah, extrapolating that out into the broader world is the problem. I'd say just like, say, just for example, the locker room talk that no woman wants to hear about, like bringing that into the workplace isn't very welcome either, right? So it's more like bringing these things that should remain a little bit more private or a little bit more internal to the group, bringing it out where it doesn't really belong. That's kind of the boiled down version. And that like,
agree.
Yeah, when you do all that, I mean, when you lose the drive for truth, it becomes a real problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
For sure.
Truth. Rohan, you got the last word.
Yeah, I mean, so two things like in terms of the feminization, I think the one concrete piece is that survey by Bo Weingard and Corey Clark, where you see this consistent thing of prioritization of consensus over truth, right? They literally say it, right? And I think there was a thing by Greg Lukianoff, who like he recently made a post where they were talking about how men are more tolerant of opposing political views than women are of their own, right? So that's kind of my piece. I did want to say like while we're here, I've been meaning to tell you, Lerpa, like for a long time, is like just for all those listening, like I would say maybe several months ago, like when I was writing, like basically nobody was reading anything that I was writing, and I would just randomly message people. I'd be like, "Hey, can you please check out my post?" Like just so I get like 5 people who read it. And Lerpa was consistently one of the few people who actually responded, actually took the time. So I just wanted to say thank you, because I do appreciate that. There was a small handful of people, you, like John Carter, Alexander Helene, like they actually took the time, and I really appreciate it. And for you, Anu, I know that several months ago, like occasionally you would message me as well, and you were like, yes, that is true. Like I would write about, the entropy of feminization, and you'd be like, yeah, we're kind of on the same level. And again, I appreciate that as well, right? And quite frankly, I think moving forward in terms of like where this is going, like I'm going to see people, I mean, Helen Andrews is a perfect example. You're going to see people just kind of be wannabes of the things that you're already talking about. So like, I think it's great to see.
I love that. Thank you for both of your support too.
Likewise.
Yeah, I just appreciate having so many, like a handful of people here who are just mutually supportive. It means a lot. If Natalie is still on, I want to say the same thing to her, because she's been incredibly supportive of me, and I think you too, Lerpa. Yeah, I just really appreciate it. Lerpa, thank you. Rohan, thank you. You guys have been awesome. Thank you to everyone who showed up. I will send this out probably tomorrow.
Yeah, same. Yeah, thanks for setting this up.
Yeah.
Cheers. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.